Story 1, the mile marker that counts backward. The GPS showed mile marker 284 on Interstate 70, but the green reflective sign rushing past Derek Fontain's windshield read 285. He'd been watching the numbers climb backward for the last 40 minutes, and his fuel gauge hadn't moved from 3/4 full despite driving through nearly 200 miles of Colorado darkness. The speedometer held steady at 65. The white lines disappeared beneath his Peterbilt's hood at the correct rhythm, but somehow he was traveling in reverse through a space that shouldn't exist. Derek had picked up the load in Denver at 6 p.m. on March 14, 2023, a standard furniture haul scheduled to arrive in Kansas City by dawn. 37 years old, 17 years behind the wheel, he'd driven this route 86 times before. He knew every truck stop, every speed trap, every slight grade and curve. He'd fueled up at the Flying J outside Lemon, checked his per-trip one more time, and rolled east into a clear night with a 3/4 moon hanging fat and yellow over the plains. The wrongness started at mile marker 361. He'd been running calculations in his head, fuel economy, arrival time, hours remaining on his logbook when he noticed the next marker read 362. Then 363, normal, expected. But then came 364, followed by 365, and his brain had shrugged it off as fatigue until he saw 366 and realized the numbers were climbing when they should have been descending. He was heading east. The numbers should decrease as he approached the Kansas border, always had before. Derek grabbed his CB radio, clicked the transmit button. Anyone running eastbound on I-70, this is Big Blue Peterbilt at the 366, you copy? Static answered. He tried again. Any trucks out here, come back. Nothing but the hiss of empty frequencies. He switched through all 40 channels, the standard 19, the trucker channels, even the emergency band. Dead air on everyone as if he were the only person left with a radio. The mile markers continued their impossible progression. 367, 368, 369. Derek's hands tightened on the steering wheel, leather creaking under his grip. He tried his cell phone, no signal, not even a searching indicator, just a blank void where the bars should be. His truck's computer showed all systems normal. Engine temperature perfect. Oil pressure steady. Transmission responding correctly. Everything worked, except the fundamental laws of geography. At mile marker 370, Derek made a decision. He'd pull over, stop, wait for dawn or another vehicle or something that made sense. His foot pressed the brake pedal. The pedal moved, the brake lights on his dashboard illuminated, but his speed didn't change. The engine didn't even seem to notice his foot on the brake. 65 miles per hour, constant and unbreakable. He pushed harder, standing on the brake pedal with his full weight, and the truck continued forward as if the brakes didn't exist. Panic crept into his chest like ice water filling his lungs. Derek tried the engine brake, the Jake brake that should have roared and slowed his rig with the resistance of the engine itself. The switch clicked into position, but no sound came, no familiar rumble, no change in momentum. He was a passenger now in his own truck, watching the steering wheel make tiny corrections under his hands as if the vehicle were driving itself, following a road he could see but couldn't escape. Mile marker 375 appeared in his headlights, then 376. Derek tried screaming, the sound loud in the cab but somehow absorbed by the darkness outside his windows. The prairie had vanished. No lights from distant farms, no glow of towns on the horizon, not even stars above, just absolute blackness pressing against the glass like something solid. Only the road existed, perfectly maintained pavement stretching endlessly forward under his headlights. White and yellow lines crisp and bright, mile markers appearing every 53 seconds with mathematical precision. At mile marker 380, Derek tried opening his door. The handle moved, the mechanism clicked, but the door remained sealed as if welded shut. He slammed his shoulder against it. The door didn't even vibrate. He turned to the passenger side, crawled across the seat, tried that door. Same result. The windows wouldn't open either, electric controls clicking uselessly while the glass stayed firmly in place. He was in a perfect cage, a truck-shaped cell rolling forward through impossible space. The numbers climbed past 400, past 425, past 450. Derek's watch showed 9:47 p.m., 3 hours and 47 minutes since he'd left Denver, which meant he should be well into Kansas by now, but the mile markers claimed he'd traveled backward into some version of Colorado that extended forever. His fuel gauge finally moved, dropping to half full, then to a quarter, and Derek felt a sick relief at seeing something change, even if it meant running out of diesel in this nightmare dimension. At mile marker 478, Derek saw another truck. His heart lurched with desperate hope. A red Kenworth, maybe 500 yards ahead, running the same speed, and as Derek's headlights touched its rear doors, he saw the company logo, Mitchell Furniture Transport. His company, his truck. The same load number on the trailer doors, MT-7421. He was looking at himself from behind, watching his own truck driving ahead of him. Derek's breath came in short gasps. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The engine roared, the RPMs climbed, but his speed stayed locked at 65. The distance between his truck and the one ahead never changed. He watched his own trailer running through the darkness, saw his own mud flaps, his own license plate, and through the back window of that cab he could see the silhouette of a driver staring forward, unaware of Derek watching from behind. Mile marker 500 came and went. Derek tried to think, parallel universes, time loops, some kind of dimensional fold. His mind grasped for explanations while his body started to fail. His throat was dry, desperately thirsty, but his water bottle had run empty an hour ago. He needed to piss but couldn't bring himself to move from the seat, as if staying in the driver's position might somehow give him control. Sweat soaked through his shirt, despite the air conditioning running at full blast. The truck ahead of him began to change at mile marker 537. Small at first, the right taillight flickered, then went dark. Then the left. Then all the marker lights running along the top of the trailer blinked out one by one, like Christmas lights on a dying string. The truck became a black rectangle moving through the darkness, visible only as an absence of road where Derek's headlights couldn't reach. At mile marker 551, the truck ahead simply stopped existing. Not crashed, not pulled over. It just ceased to be there, winking out of reality between one moment and the next. Derek was alone again on the endless highway, and 30 seconds later at mile marker 552, he felt his own right tail light go out. Not saw it, felt it. A sensation like a small piece of his body had been erased, a numbness spreading from where the truck ended and the trailer began. Derek looked in his mirrors and saw his own trailer lights beginning to fail. Right marker light gone, left marker light flickering. The lights marching backward toward his cab, approaching like a wave of darkness consuming his truck from behind. He could feel each one go out, tiny deaths marking his slow disappearance. His left mud flap light extinguished, and he felt it like losing a tooth. His right side marker light on the back of the cab vanished, and he felt it like a hole punched through his ribs. Mile marker 580. Mile marker 581. The darkness was eating his trailer now, the physical structure dissolving into nothing. Through his driver's side mirror, Derek watched his trailer doors fade away, the metal going transparent, then gone, revealing the furniture inside, couches and tables and chairs all neatly strapped down. And then the furniture began to vanish too, piece by piece, as if an invisible hand was carefully removing everything from existence. At mile marker 588, Derek felt the dissolution reach his cab. His right side mirror disappeared mid-glance, the metal and glass simply ceasing to exist, and where the mirror had been he felt nothing, not even a memory of what should be there. His passenger seat faded next, the vinyl and foam and metal frame unmaking themselves atom by atom. Derek tried to scream, but his voice came out thin, weak, as if the sound itself was being erased. The mile markers continued. 590, 591. Derek's right arm began to feel strange, distant, as if falling asleep but worse, a sensation of unbecoming spreading from his fingertips up through his hand. He looked down and saw his fingers starting to turn transparent, the steering wheel visible through his flesh, his bones like pale shadows inside vanishing skin. He tried to flex his fingers and they moved, but he could barely feel them, barely feel anything. Mile marker 600 appeared in his headlights, and Derek Fontaine realized with crystal clarity that when the numbers reached some final point, maybe 620, maybe 666, maybe 1,000, he would be completely gone. Not dead, not crashed, simply unmade, erased from reality, traveling backward through space until he reversed past the moment of his own existence. His left leg disappeared at mile marker 607. His dashboard began to fade at 608. At 609, half his face felt strange, numb, and when he tried to look in his remaining mirror, he saw his left eye was gone, just smooth skin where it should have been, his face becoming a half thing that couldn't possibly be alive, yet somehow still perceived the road ahead. Still saw the mile markers climbing. Still felt the truck moving T. Rough the darkness. Mile marker 615. His chest was hollow now, transparent, the seat back visible through his body. Both arms were gone to the elbows. His vision was narrowing, the world becoming a tunnel, and at the end of that tunnel was another mile marker, 616, bright green and reflective and impossible, counting backward through his life, subtracting him from reality one piece at a time. At mile marker 619, Derek Fontaine had one final thought before his consciousness itself began to unravel. He'd never see 620. The number would climb forever, always approaching but never reaching, and he would spend eternity dissolving in this space between numbers, between existence and void, too unmade to die but not gone enough to escape the awareness of his own erasure. The truck ran on. The mile markers climbed. And somewhere on Interstate 70 in Colorado at 9:53 p.m. on March 14, 2023, Derek Fontaine's dispatch showed him as simply unreachable, his truck's GPS signal lost, his emergency beacon silent, his entire existence reduced to an unsolved disappearance that would haunt his family and coworkers but never be explained. Because how do you explain someone who didn't crash, didn't die, but simply reversed out of reality one mile marker at a time? On March 19th, a state trooper found Derek's empty truck at the Lemon Flying J, parked perfectly in a space, engine cold, keys in the ignition. Everything in order except for one detail that the official report didn't know how to categorize. The odometer showed negative 312 miles. Story 2, the rest stop that remembers. Patricia Sullivan's hands wouldn't stop bleeding, and she'd been dead for 6 hours. She knew she was dead because she'd watched herself die in the rest stop bathroom mirror, watched her face turn gray, watched her eyes go flat and empty, watched her body slump against the sink at exactly 3:17 a.m. while her consciousness stayed awake and aware and trapped inside the corpse that no longer needed to breathe. The blood dripping from her palms came from trying to claw through the bathroom door, her fingernails torn away, skin shredded. But the door wouldn't open and she couldn't leave, and the rest stop kept resetting every 42 minutes, bringing her back to 3:17 a.m. over and over again. The first death had been from the heart attack. Patricia had been 51 years old, 22 years driving long-haul routes, and she'd felt the pain start in her left arm while parallel parking her Freightliner at the rest area on Highway 191 in northern Utah, 40 miles south of the Wyoming border. Just heartburn, she'd told herself, climbing down from the cab, walking toward the small brick building that contained the bathrooms and vending machines. She'd felt the tightness in her chest intensify as she pushed through the women's restroom door, and by the time she reached the sink, she knew what was happening. She'd fumbled for her phone, fingers numb, vision narrowing, but there was no signal, no bars, no emergency service indicator, nothing. The pain crushed her chest like a vice tightening, and Patricia had looked up into the mirror to see her own face going pale and sweaty, had thought, this is how I die, alone in a rest stop bathroom in the middle of nowhere. And then her heart had simply stopped, and she'd watched herself fall forward against the sink, consciousness persisting impossibly while her body shut down. For maybe 30 seconds, Patricia had experienced normal death, darkness, absence, a fading away. But then she was back, awareness flooding into her dead body like water into a sponge, and she was standing in front of the sink again, gasping for breath her lungs didn't need, heart silent in her chest, blood sitting motionless in her veins. She'd grabbed her own wrist, searching for a pulse, nothing, pressed her hand to her chest, no heartbeat, no movement. But she was awake, conscious, thinking, feeling. Patricia had run to the bathroom door and pulled. Locked. She pushed. Wouldn't budge. She'd thrown her full weight against it. The door was solid metal in a metal frame, and it didn't move even a fraction of an inch. She'd screamed for help, her voice echoing off tile walls, but no sound seemed to penetrate beyond the bathroom itself. She could hear trucks passing on the highway outside, could hear the wind rattling the building's vents, but her screams just bounced back at her. She'd tried the window, a small frosted glass rectangle set high in the wall. Locked, sealed, wouldn't even crack when she threw the metal trash can at it. The glass absorbed the impact without a sound, without a mark, as if it weren't really glass at all but something pretending to be glass. Patricia had dragged the trash can under the window, climbed on top, tried to smash through with her elbow with her fist, had beaten against it until her knuckles split and her blood smeared across the frosted surface. And then she'd noticed the clock on wall resetting. 3:17 a.m. Again. The same position of the second hand, the same hum of the fluorescent lights. Patricia had looked down at her hands, the blood was gone, the skin unbroken, and when she checked the window, there was no smear, no damage. She checked her phone, 3:17 a.m., March 22nd, 2023. The same moment she died the first time. For the next 6 hours, or what felt like 6 hours in subjective experience, Patricia had tried everything. She'd searched for other exits, found none. She'd tried to break through the ceiling tiles, found solid concrete above them. She'd attempted to flood the bathroom by plugging the sink and toilet, but the water just drained away impossibly fast, as if the plumbing led to a void rather than actual pipes. She'd tried to start a fire using paper towels and the hand dryer, but nothing would ignite, the paper towels refusing to burn even when she held them directly against the heating element. And every 42 minutes the bathroom reset. 3:17 a.m. would arrive, and suddenly Patricia would be standing in front of the sink again, watching herself die in the mirror, feeling the heart attack crush her chest, experiencing the death over and over. She tried to prevent it, tried to sit down, to relax, to somehow avoid the moment, but the loop was absolute. 3:17 arrived and her heart stopped and she died and came back and nothing she did made any difference. By the 8th loop, Patricia had started to notice the details. The bathroom wasn't quite right. The grout between the tiles was too perfect, each line exactly the same width. The mirror's reflection was slightly off, showing her at an angle that didn't match her actual position. The toilet paper roll never decreased, always showing exactly 43 sheets. The soap dispenser gave exactly 12 drops when pressed. Everything was precisely, impossibly consistent. She started testing the limits. At 3:19 a.m. in the 9th loop, she carved her name into the wall using a broken piece of tile. PATRICIASULLIVAN, help me. The letters vanished at 3:17 a.m. in the 10th loop. She wrote messages on the mirror with her lipstick, trapped, call police. They erased themselves at reset. She tore the hand dryer off the wall. It reappeared intact at the start of the next loop. The bathroom was self-repairing, returning to a default state, and Patricia was part of that state now. In the 14th loop, Patricia tried to see outside. She stood on the trash can and put her face against the frosted window, peering through a small clear spot in the glass. Outside, she could see the parking lot, her truck still sitting where she'd parked it, and beyond that the highway stretching into darkness. She could see other vehicles passing, a minivan, a pickup truck, another semi, but they moved wrong. Too fast, then too slow, then backward, as if she were watching footage being scrubbed through on fast forward and rewind. Time outside the bathroom wasn't running normally, or time inside the bathroom wasn't, or both. She started seeing other people in the 16th loop, not in the bathroom with her, through the window. A man standing next to his car in the parking lot, absolutely motionless, frozen mid-step. A woman sitting at the picnic table, also frozen, a sandwich halfway to her mouth. Patricia screamed at them through the glass, but they didn't react, couldn't hear her. And then at 3:17 a.m. they reset too, disappearing, reappearing in slightly different positions, frozen again. They were stuck like her, trapped in their own loops, all of them caught in this rest stop that didn't follow normal time. In the 20th loop, Patricia noticed the graffiti, not on the walls of the bathroom, in the walls, visible beneath the paint like shadows under ice. Names carved into the structure itself, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. James Morrison 1987. Lindacho 1993. Robert Danils 2001. Maria Vasquez 2008. Names and dates going back decades, all scratched into the substrate of the building, all trapped here before her. She was just the latest victim of whatever this place was. The bathroom itself was alive, Patricia realized in the 25th loop. Not alive like a living thing, but alive like a recording that played itself over and over, capturing anyone unfortunate enough to die within its boundaries. The rest stop was a trap, a closed loop in time that preserved the moment of death and replayed it eternally. And she was the recording now. She was the moment being preserved. By the 30th loop, Patricia had stopped trying to escape. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, and watched the clock tick through the same 42 minutes again and again. She counted the tiles, 384 on the floor, 192 on the walls. She memorized the pattern of cracks in the ceiling. She learned the exact pitch of the fluorescent light hum. There was nothing else to do. In the 35th loop, she started to forget Ing's small things at first, what her daughter's voice sounded like. The name of her first dog, the color of her kitchen walls. The memories were leaking away, being overwritten by the endless repetition of these 42 minutes. She tried to hold on to them, tried to focus on her life before the rest stopped, but with each reset another piece vanished. Her husband's face became blurry. Her mother's name slipped away. The city where she was born became uncertain. By the 40th loop, Patricia could barely remember being alive. The bathroom felt like the only real thing, the only place that had ever existed. The loops felt normal now, expected, as if she'd always been here dying and reviving and dying again. Her identity was dissolving, worn away by repetition until only the basic awareness remained. I am Patricia, I am trapped, I am dying. But even that was starting to feel uncertain. In the 43rd loop, Patricia Sullivan realized she could see through her hands. Not transparent exactly, but fading, becoming less solid with each reset. The bathroom was slowly erasing her, reducing her to just another shadow beneath the paint, just another name carved in the walls by someone who would be forgotten. She tried to scream, but her voice was getting quieter, each loop stealing more of her substance, more of her reality. By the 50th loop, though she'd lost count by now, could only guess at the number, Patricia was barely aware. She was a ghost haunting her own death, a recording playing so many times the tape had begun to degrade. She couldn't remember her last name, couldn't remember where she'd been driving. Couldn't remember anything except the bathroom, the mirror, the clock showing 3:17 a.m., the crushing pain in her chest that might have never really happened, might have always been happening, might be the only thing that was real. In the bathroom of the rest stop on Highway 191, 40 miles south of the Wyoming border, time continues to loop. At 3:17 a.m. every 42 minutes, a woman dies of a heart attack in front of the mirror, though no body is ever found and no missing person report matches the description. Truckers who stop there sometimes report feeling watched in the bathrooms. Some claim to hear screaming that cuts off abruptly. Others see names scratched into the paint that vanish when they look directly at them. On August 8, 2023, a maintenance worker named Thomas Reeves entered the women's restroom to fix a reported leak. His work order was timestamped 3:17 a.m. He was never seen again. His truck was found in the parking lot, keys in the ignition, engine running. When police investigated, they found a name freshly carved into the bathroom wall beneath 47 layers of paint. Patricia Sullivan 2023. The rest stop is still open. People still use it. And every 42 minutes, whether anyone is present to witness it or not, someone dies in that bathroom and comes back and dies again, adding their loop to all the other loops, their death to all the other deaths, their name to the wall that remembers everyone who's ever been trapped in its 42-minute eternity. Story 3, The Cargo That Breathes. Marcus Chen heard the breathing coming from his trailer at mile marker 73 on Interstate 95, and he'd been hauling empty containers for 3 hours. The manifest said empty, 8 40-foot shipping containers deadheading from Savannah back to Newark. No cargo, no weight except the containers themselves. But something in the trailer behind him was breathing. Deep, slow breaths that he could feel through the cab, rhythmic pulses that made the whole rig shudder slightly every 6 seconds. In, out. In, out, like the trailer itself had developed lungs. Marcus pulled onto the shoulder at mile marker 74, hands shaking as he set the parking brake. 43 years old, 11 years driving, and he'd never felt anything like this. He stepped down from the cab into the humid Georgia night, semi-trucks roaring past him on the highway, and walked along the passenger side of his trailer toward the rear doors. The breathing sound was louder out here, unmistakable, a wet inhale-exhale that seemed to come from inside the containers themselves. The metal skin of the trailer vibrated with each breath, almost like a heartbeat. He climbed up onto the ICC bumper, reaching for the trailer door's locking mechanism, and stopped. The metal was warm. Not hot like it had been sitting in the sun. It was 11 p.m., been dark for hours, but warm like flesh, like touching someone's skin. Marcus pressed his palm flat against the door and felt it pulse. In, out, the metal expanding and contracting, breathing alive. His phone showed a full signal. He could call dispatch, report a problem, get instructions. But what would he say? The empty trailer is breathing? They'd tell him to take a break, get some sleep, maybe suggest he see a doctor about stress. Marcus had the bills to think about. He's scheduled to keep. Newark needed these containers by dawn the next day, and empty containers shouldn't be a problem. Shouldn't be anything except metal boxes taking up space. He unlocked the doors anyway, had to check, had to see. The mechanism clicked open and Marcus pulled the right door wide, his flashlight beam cutting into the trailer's interior. 8 containers stacked 2 high, 4 rows deep, all supposedly empty, all showing the correct numbers on their manifests. Nothing looked wrong. Nothing looked different than any other deadhead haul he'd done, except for the breathing. Marcus climbed into the trailer, his boots echoing on the metal floor, and approached the nearest container. The breathing was definitely coming from inside them, all 8 containers inhaling and exhaling in perfect synchronization. He found the door handle on the first container, the one marked CSNU 4,732,801, and opened it. Empty. Completely empty. 400 cubic feet of empty space with walls that expanded slightly with each breath, metal rippling like a diaphragm, but nothing inside. Nothing to explain the sound or the movement. He checked the second container. Empty. The third. Empty. All 8 containers were empty exactly as the manifest claimed, but all 8 were breathing, their walls moving in and out, their interiors somehow alive despite containing nothing but air. Marcus stood in the center of his trailer, surrounded by breathing metal, and felt his own breath starting to match the rhythm. 6 seconds in. 6 seconds out. His lungs synchronizing with whatever this was. That's when he noticed the temperature. It was getting warmer inside the trailer, not like heat building up, but like being inside something's body cavity, humid and close. Marcus could feel his shirt sticking to his back, sweat beading on his forehead. The air itself felt thicker, harder to breathe, as if he were inhaling the same breath the containers were exhaling. The walls were closing in, the ceiling pressing down, and Marcus stumbled backward out of the trailer, gasping, almost falling off the ICC bumper onto the pavement. He locked the doors with shaking hands and climbed back into his cab. Maybe he was sick. Maybe carbon monoxide was leaking somehow. Maybe he'd had a stroke and his brain was misfiring. But the breathing continued, stronger now, loud enough to hear even through the cab's insulation. Marcus could feel it through his seat, through the steering wheel, a pulse that traveled through the entire rig like a heartbeat. He started driving again. What else could he do? The schedule said Newark by dawn. The manifest said empty containers. Nothing on any paperwork mentioned breathing or pulsing or temperatures rising. Marcus convinced himself it was stress, imagination, something that would make sense in daylight after coffee and food. Just drive, just deliver, just get paid and go home. At mile marker 127, the breathing changed. Still 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, but now there was a sound accompanying it. A wet, organic sound like fluid moving through passages. Marcus could hear it clearly, a sloshing gurgling that made him think of lungs filling with water, of someone drowning from the inside. He turned up the radio, trying to drown it out, but the breathing sound was louder, coming not through the air but through the truck itself, transmitted through metal and rivets directly into his bones. His trailer started to sway, not the normal sway of highway driving, but a rhythmic side-to-side motion matching the breathing pattern. In the trailer leaned left, out it leaned right, 6 seconds each direction. Marcus fought the steering wheel, trying to keep his rig straight, but the weight distribution was shifting despite the cargo being empty. The containers were moving, though they were locked in place with proper twist locks. Or something inside the containers was moving, despite them being empty. At mile marker 151, Marcus pulled into a rest area. He had to check again, had to see what was happening. Other trucks were parked in the rest area, drivers sleeping in their cabs, normal people having normal nights. Marcus walked past them to his trailer, unlocked the doors again, and climbed inside with his flashlight. The containers had changed. The metal was no longer metal. It was something organic, something that looked like metal but felt wrong under his flashlight beam. The surfaces were slick, glistening, covered in a thin layer of moisture that hadn't been there an hour ago. The breathing was deafening inside the trailer, the sound bouncing off walls that expanded and contracted visibly now, bulging outward with each inhale, sucking inward with each exhale. Marcus approached the first container, CSNU 4,732,801, and looked inside again. Still empty, still 400 cubic feet of nothing. But the walls were breathing, and in the far corner something was growing. Not something inside the container, something that was part of the container, a growth emerging from the metal itself. It looked like tissue, pink and wet, pulsing with veins that branched across the interior surface like a circulatory system developing in fast forward. He checked the second container. The same growth, further developed, covering maybe a quarter of the interior surface. The third container was half covered, the tissue thick enough now that Marcus could see it moving independently of the breathing, writhing slowly like muscle under skin. The fourth container was more tissue than metal, the growth forming structures that looked disturbingly like organs. A shape that might have been a lung, another that resembled a stomach, tubes connecting them that pulsed with fluid. Marcus ran, not walked, not stumbled, ran through his trailer, jumped down from the ICC bumper, slammed and locked the doors. His hands were covered in the moisture from the container's walls, slick and warm and smelling like something he couldn't identify, something between blood and chemicals and rot. He wiped his hands on his jeans, smearing the substance across the denim, and it left stains that looked almost like fingerprints, as if the moisture had its own unique pattern. He should call someone, police, fire department, hazmat team. Something was wrong with his cargo despite it being empty, despite the manifest saying nothing was wrong. But Marcus looked at the other trucks in the rest area, looked at the normal world continuing around him, and couldn't make himself dial, because what was happening didn't make sense. Empty containers can't grow organs, metal can't breathe, and if he called someone, if he tried to explain, they'd think he was crazy. They'd drug test him, they'd pull his CDL, they'd ruin his life over something that couldn't possibly be real. So Marcus got back in his cab and drove. Mile marker 151 to 152 to 153. The breathing continued, louder now, wet and labored. The trailer swayed harder, rocking his whole rig side to side. Other drivers flashed their lights at him, probably thinking he had a tire about to blow, but Marcus just drove. Newark by dawn. That was the job. That was what the manifest said. At mile marker 187, somewhere in South Carolina, Marcus heard the first heartbeat. Not the breathing pulse he'd been feeling, an actual heartbeat, a solid thump-thump, thump-thump coming from the trailer behind him. Something in those containers had developed a heart. Something was alive back there, despite the containers being empty, despite there being nothing to be alive. The heartbeat synced with the breathing, creating a rhythm that made Marcus's whole truck feel like a living thing. His fuel gauge started to drop faster than it should. Not mechanically failing, actually using more fuel, as if the trailer's weight had increased despite the cargo remaining empty on paper. Marcus could feel the difference in how the truck handled, more resistance, more drag, as if he were pulling something massive and alive. His engine worked harder, RPMs climbing, temperature rising, and when Marcus checked his mirrors, he saw exhaust pouring from his stacks, black smoke that shouldn't be there. At mile marker 223, Marcus felt something move. Not the swaying, not the breathing, a distinct movement inside the trailer, as if something had shifted position, as if something was walking around back there. Heavy footsteps, one after another, pacing the length of the trailer. He could hear them over the road noise, over the engine, distinct thuds that made the whole rig shake. Something was in the trailer. Something that hadn't been there when he'd loaded the empty containers in Savannah. Marcus pulled over again, this time on the shoulder of I-95, with trucks screaming past him at 70 miles per hour. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He grabbed his phone, started to dial 911, and looked down at his palm. The moisture from the containers was still there, dried now into a film that had absorbed into his skin. And in the center of his palm, a small growth had appeared, a tiny piece of pink tissue, no bigger than a pencil eraser, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He dropped the phone, stared at his hand. The growth was connected to him, part of him now, and as he watched it got slightly larger, spreading across his palm like a stain. Marcus grabbed a bottle of water, poured it over his hand, trying to wash the growth away, but water didn't affect it. He scratched at it with his fingernails. It hurt like scratching his own flesh, because it was his own flesh now. Whatever the containers were growing, it had infected him. The footsteps in the trailer stopped. Silence except for the breathing and heartbeat. Then something hit the trailer walls from inside, a massive impact that rocked the whole truck. Again. Something was trying to get out, something large enough to dent the metal, strong enough to make 40-foot containers shake. Another impact, and Marcus saw the trail. Our wall bulged outward near the doors, metal stretching but not tearing, as if the material had become elastic. Marcus got back in his cab and drove. Not to Newark, not to any destination on his manifest. Just drove faster than he should, weaving through traffic, trying to outrun the thing growing in his trailer, the thing growing in his hand, the thing he was becoming part of. The growth on his palm had spread to his fingers, tissue connecting between them like webbing, and when he gripped the steering wheel, he could feel his hand starting to merge with it, flesh and plastic becoming one thing. At mile marker 267, somewhere in North Carolina, Marcus couldn't tell where he ended and the truck began. His feet were fusing with the pedals, his back merging with the seat, his hands becoming part of the steering wheel. He could feel the road through his tires, feel the engine firing in what might have been his chest, or might have been the Cummins diesel under the hood. The breathing was his breathing, the heartbeat was his heartbeat, and the containers in his trailer were his lungs, his stomach, his organs developing in metal wombs. The last coherent thought Marcus Chen had was at mile marker 284. The containers were never empty. They were incubators, and he was the seed. On November 3, 2023, a driverless truck was found in a rest area outside Richmond, Virginia. The engine was running. The trailer doors were sealed. The manifest showed 8 empty containers en route from Savannah to Newark. When authorities opened the trailer, they found the containers covered inside with organic material, tissue that had grown over every surface, forming structures that resembled human organs but grown to massive scale. In the center of the trailer floor was a driver's uniform, empty, collapsed as if the person wearing it had simply vanished. The name tag read MARCUSCHEN. DNA tests on the tissue came back as human. Marcus Chen's DNA, all of it. 8 containers full of him, grown and distributed and breathing. The containers were incinerated per biohazard protocols. But 3 weeks later, a truck driver named Sarah Matthews reported hearing breathing coming from her supposedly empty trailer, and when investigators checked, they found her manifest was identical to Marcus's. 8 empty containers from Savannah to Newark. The cargo is never empty. It's just waiting for the next driver to become what it needs to become. And somewhere on I-95, another truck is breathing. Story 4. The radio frequency THAT answers. Tyrell, Washington discovered the frequency at 2:33 a.m. on a Tuesday, somewhere between Albuquerque and Amarillo on Interstate 40, and by 4:15 a.m. he had learned 37 things about his own death that hadn't happened yet. The CB radio in his Kenworth W900 had been acting strange for the last hour. Standard trucker channel 19 kept phasing in and out, static that came in waves like breathing. And when Tyrell spun the dial looking for clear air, he found something broadcasting on channel 3, which was supposed to be empty, restricted, a dead zone nobody used. The voice was his own. Not similar, not close. Exactly his voice, his cadence, his slight Alabama accent speaking clearly through the static. Mile marker 198. That's where your left front tire blows. Not now. 17 miles ahead. You'll feel the wobble at 196, but you won't slow down fast enough, and at 198 the tread separates and you lose control. Tyrell grabbed the CB handset, clicked transmit. Who is this? This some kind of joke? No response. Just his own voice continuing. You'll cross the median, no oncoming traffic, that's the only mercy. You'll roll twice before the rig stops on its side. You'll survive the crash. You won't survive what comes after. He checked his mirrors. Nobody behind him, nobody alongside. Just empty desert highway stretching in both directions, his headlights cutting through darkness that seemed unusually solid. Mile marker 181 passed. Then 182. Tyrell looked down at his tires on the driver's side. They looked fine, the front one showing good tread in his mirror. No wobble, no vibration, no indication of a problem. But at mile marker 196, exactly as the voice predicted, Tyrell felt it. A slight wobble in the steering wheel, a vibration that wasn't there before. His heart hammered. Coincidence had to be. He eased off the accelerator, started to slow down, but the wobble intensified faster than he could brake, and at mile marker 198 his left front tire exploded. The physics happened exactly as the voice described. Median crossed, rig rolling, metal screaming, glass shattering, and Tyrell found himself hanging upside down in his seatbelt, blood dripping from somewhere on his scalp, the world sideways and wrong. The CB radio was still on, still broadcasting. His own voice spoke through the static. "You have 4 minutes before the fire starts. The fuel tank ruptured in the roll. Diesel is spreading. Yo. Electrical system is sparking. Don't try to grab your phone. Don't try to get your jacket. Unbuckle and get out through the windshield. 4 minutes." Tyrell's fingers found the seatbelt release. He dropped onto the cab ceiling, now the floor, and crawled toward the windshield, which had shattered into a spiderweb of cracks. He kicked it out, pulled himself through, emerged onto the desert pavement just as he smelled the diesel. The voice had been right. The voice had known. He ran, 50 yards from his overturned rig, 70, and at what he guessed was 4 minutes, flames erupted from his cab, orange and hungry, consuming his truck, his cargo, everything. Tyrell stood on the shoulder of I-40 at 2:51 a.m. watching his livelihood burn, and his CB radio, which should have been on fire inside the cab, spoke clearly despite the distance, despite the flames. "Now you listen. Now you understand. I know what happens because I've already lived it. I am you 3 hours ahead. Everything I tell you has already happened to me, and everything happening to me now will happen to you in 3 hours." Tyrell looked around for the source of the voice. It wasn't coming from his burning truck. It was coming from everywhere, from the air itself, as if the voice were broadcast directly into his skull. He covered his ears, didn't matter, the voice continued. "You're going to walk east. You'll try to flag down a vehicle, but the first 3 will drive past. The 4th is a blue Honda Civic driven by a woman named Melissa Cross, and she will stop. Don't get in her car." I got in her car. "You can't see it from outside, but she has a gun under her seat, and she's not who she pretends to be." A minute later, headlights appeared from the west, a white pickup truck doing at least 80. Tyrell waved his arms, jumping up and down on the shoulder. The truck blew past him without slowing. Second vehicle, a sedan, dark-colored, also ignored him. Third vehicle, a semi, another trucker who should have helped, but the rig kept rolling. Tyrell felt sick. The voice was right again. Fourth vehicle, a blue Honda Civic. It slowed, pulled onto the shoulder 20 yards past Tyrell, and a woman rolled down her window. Pretty, maybe 35, concerned expression. "Oh my God, are you okay? Was that your truck?" Her name would be Melissa Cross. She would have a gun. Tyrell backed away from the car. "I'm fine, help is coming, you go ahead." The woman looked confused, maybe suspicious, but she drove off. And the voice spoke again. "Good, you're learning. I didn't listen. I got in her car. She drove me 15 miles, then pulled the gun, took me to a cabin off Highway 54. I'm in that cabin now, 3 hours ahead of you. She's not alone here. They're doing things. I can't describe it all. Just know, don't trust anyone who stops. Walk. Stay on the highway." Tyrell walked, mile marker 198 to 199 to 200. The fire behind him lit up the sky, and eventually he heard sirens, but he kept walking, didn't wait for police or fire trucks. The voice had said to walk, and the voice had been right about everything else. His phone had been in the truck, now melted. His wallet, his paperwork, his CDL, all gone. He was just a man walking east on I-40 with nothing but his clothes and a voice in his head telling him about his future. At mile marker 203, the voice said, "There's a rest area at 207. Don't go inside the building." I went inside. There's something wrong with the building. It's not empty. It looks empty, but it's not. There are people in the walls. I can hear them. They tried to pull me into the walls. I got out, but barely. Stay outside. There's a payphone outside that still works. Call 911 from there. Tyrell reached the rest area at 3:47 a.m. A small building, brick, bathrooms, and vending machines. It looked normal, safe. But the voice said don't go inside, and the voice knew. Tyrell found the payphone, ancient, should have been removed years ago, and lifted the receiver. Dial tone. He dialed 911. The operator answered, 911, what's your emergency? But it wasn't an operator. It was his own voice, the same voice that had been narrating his future. Don't say anything, I'm you, remember, 3 hours ahead. I tried calling 911, this is what happened. The call doesn't go through to real emergency services, it goes somewhere else. Hang up. Tyrell slammed the phone down, stood under the flickering rest area lights. The building's door was cracked open, and through the gap Tyrell could see movement inside, shadows shifting along the walls in patterns that didn't match anything casting them. The voice was right. Again. Start walking again, the voice said. Next town is 43 miles, you'll make it, but you'll be exhausted. At the town, there's a police station. You'll think you're safe there, you're not. I'm at the police station now. It looks normal from outside, but inside, the officers aren't human. They're wearing skins, I can see the seams. They're processing me, taking information, and I know what they're going to do. They're going to put me in a cell, and the cell is going to move, and I'm going to end up somewhere that isn't the town, isn't Earth maybe. Don't go to the police station. Tyrell kept walking. Mile marker 207 to 208 to 209. The sun started to rise around 6:30 a.m., light spreading across the desert, and Tyrell thought maybe daylight would help, would make this nightmare make sense. But the voice continued. Daylight doesn't matter. I'm seeing daylight now 3 hours ahead, and it's not better. The town is called Glenrio. You'll see the sign at mile marker 250. Population 11. Every single person in that town is wrong. Their faces move incorrectly. Their voices come from the wrong place. Don't interact with anyone. By the time Tyrell reached Glenrio at 11:23 a.m., he'd been walking for over 8 hours. His feet were blistered, his throat raw from thirst, his body shaking with exhaustion. The town was tiny. A few buildings, a gas station, a diner. It looked abandoned, most structures boarded up, but the diner had lights on, an open sign glowing. Don't go in the diner, the voice said. I went in, I ordered coffee. The waitress smiled at me, but her smile was wrong, too many teeth arranged wrong in her mouth. I drank the coffee anyway, mistake. The coffee is making me see things I shouldn't see, dimensions I shouldn't perceive. I can see you now, Tyrell. I can see you standing outside the diner 8 hours behind me, listening to my voice. And I can see what's behind you. Don't turn around. Tyrell turned around anyway. Nothing, just empty street, abandoned buildings, desert beyond. But the voice screamed. I said don't turn around. Now it knows you've seen it. Now it knows you're aware. Run into the desert, off the road. It can't follow you far from the highway. This is all connected to the highway, to Interstate 40 specifically. Get away from the road. Tyrell ran. Not into the diner, not toward any building, into the desert, off the pavement, over scrub brush and rocks, his exhausted legs somehow finding strength. Behind him, something followed. He couldn't see it clearly, but he could hear it. Footsteps that didn't sync with any normal gait, sounds that didn't match the terrain, breathing that came from multiple sources. The voice guided him. Keep running, quarter mile, there's a drainage ditch, hide there, it will pass. I hid there 8 hours ago. I'm still 8 hours ahead of you, but I remember this part. The drainage ditch is safe. It's off the pattern. Whatever this is, it follows patterns, and the ditch breaks the pattern. Tyrell found the ditch, dropped into it, pressed himself flat against the concrete. Above him on the desert surface, something moved past. He caught glimpses. Too many legs, or not enough, bodies that folded in impossible ways, faces that might have been human once but weren't anymore. The things moved in a pack, searching, and then continued past, heading back toward the highway. He lay in the ditch for an hour. The voice was silent. Finally, Tyrell climbed out, exhausted, terrified. Talk to me, he said to the air. Tell me what to do. The voice returned, but different now. Weaker, distorted. Tyrell, I don't have much time. 3 hours ago, which is now for you, I hid in the ditch. That was the moment I thought I'd escaped. But I was wrong. The things didn't pass by me. They were hurting me, pushing me towards something. And I arrived there 3 hours later, which is now for me. I'm at the place they wanted me to go. It's a structure in the desert, maybe 20 miles south of Glenrio. It looks like a radio tower, but it's not transmitting normal signals. It's transmitting time. It's broadcasting moments, looping them, creating spaces where people exist 3 hours ahead of themselves, speaking warnings that don't help because we all do the same things, make the same choices. We're not preventing anything. We're just experiencing it twice, once as a warning, once as reality. Tyrell stood in the desert, the sun beating down, his body failing. How do I stop this? How do I break the loop? You don't, the voice said. I'm at the tower now, they're taking me inside. There are others here, other drivers, other people who found the frequency. We're all broadcasting now. All warning our past selves, all failing to change anything. In 3 hours, you'll be here too. You'll try to run, try to fight, but you'll end up here and you'll broadcast back to yourself and the loop continues. This is what happens to people who find Channel 3. This is what the frequency does. Static consumed the voice. Tyrell stood alone in the desert, and then he heard it, his own voice, but from somewhere in front of him now, not behind. Tyrell, I'm you 6 hours ahead. I've been at the tower for 3 hours. I know what they do to you here. I know what you become. Start walking south. You can't avoid it. But I can tell you one thing. When you arrive, go to the east entrance, not the west. The west entrance leads to the broadcast room where I am. The east entrance leads to something else. I don't know what. None of us know. No one's tried it because we all followed the same path, but maybe that's the way out. Maybe the only way to break the loop is to break the pattern, go east. Tyrell walked south, miles through desert, hours under the sun. He was dying of thirst, dying of exhaustion, but he walked. And at 5:17 p.m., exactly 3 hours after the voice said he would, Tyrell Washington saw the tower. 100 feet tall metal framework satellite dishes pointed at the sky. And at the base, 2 entrances, west and east. The west entrance had light spilling from it. The east entrance was dark. Tyrell walked to the east entrance, took a breath, stepped inside. On Channel 3, somewhere on Interstate 40, a new voice began broadcasting. Not Tyrell Washington, someone else. Another driver who found the frequency. Another warning that wouldn't change anything. And deep in the tower's east wing, Tyrell walked corridors that twisted through dimensions that weren't space, through time that wasn't linear, until he found himself standing in front of a CB radio, old, analog, dust-covered, with his own hand reaching out to spin the dial. He stopped, didn't spin the dial, broke the pattern, and the tower screamed. Story 5, the way station that WIGHS wrong. The scale at the Banning way station read 847,329 pounds, and Jennifer Ockhaffer's truck should have weighed 42,000. She stared at the digital display, certain she'd misread it, but the numbers stayed solid. 847,329 pounds. 847,000 pounds. Her empty flatbed, her Mac Anthem, her body, altogether maybe 42,000 pounds. The scale was broken. Had to be. Except the scale had weighed the truck in front of her correctly. A FedEx rig that came in at 43,000, right where it should be. The inspection officer, a heavy-set man with a gray mustache, waved Jennifer over to the inspection bay. She pulled forward, set the parking brake, climbed down. The officer was looking at his tablet, frowning. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to reweigh. We're getting an anomalous reading." Jennifer followed him back to the scale. They did it again, drove her truck onto the platform, waited for the reading. The display flickered, calculating, and settled on a new number, 923,584 pounds, higher than before. Impossible. The officer's frown deepened. "Ma'am, what are you hauling?" "Nothing, deadhead from Oakland to Phoenix. Empty flatbed. You can see it's empty." Jennifer gestured at her trailer, completely bare, no cargo, no straps, nothing but steel deck and air. The officer walked around her trailer, inspecting. Knocked on the deck, checked underneath, came back shaking his head. "Scale must be malfunctioning. I'm going to log this as equipment failure and let you through. But for our records, step on the portable scale, just you, no truck." They had a small platform scale near the inspection office, the kind used to weigh drivers when there's a discrepancy. Jennifer stepped onto it. The digital readout flickered. 127 pounds, normal, about right for her frame, but then the numbers started climbing. 134 pounds, 156 pounds, 203 pounds. The officer was watching, confused, and Jennifer looked down at her body. She wasn't changing, wasn't growing, but the scale kept climbing. 347 pounds, 521 pounds, 889 pounds. Jennifer stepped off. The numbers stopped at 1,247 pounds. She looked at the officer. He looked at his tablet. "I'm calling maintenance," he said. "Scales are critically malfunctioning. You're cleared to continue. Sorry for the delay." Jennifer got back in her truck and drove. But something was wrong, not with the scales, with her. She could feel it, a heaviness that wasn't about weight but about presence, about existing more than she had before. Her hands on the steering wheel felt denser, more real, as if she were occupying more space than her body should contain. She checked her mirrors. She looked normal, same face, same body, but the sensation persisted. At the first truck stop, 30 miles past the way station, Jennifer tried walking from her truck to the convenience store. Her footsteps felt heavy, each one landing with more force than it should. The pavement cracked slightly under her boots, hairline fractures radiating from each step. She stopped, looked back, saw the trail of damage she'd left. Other truckers were walking the same path without issue, but Jennifer's steps broke the ground. Inside the convenience store, the clerk looked up and his eyes went wide, not at Jennifer specifically, but at something about her. "Ma'am, are you okay? You look," he trailed off, uncertain. "I look what?" Jennifer asked. "I don't know, heavy, dense, I can't explain it. It's like you're taking up more space than you should. Like looking at you makes my eyes hurt." Jennifer bought a coffee and left, the automatic door struggling to open for her, the mechanism groaning as if she weighed a ton. In her truck's mirror, she examined herself again. Normal, same 5'6" frame, same 130 pounds, same brown skin and dark hair. But when she looked at her reflection, it seemed like the mirror was working harder to show her image, the glass flexing slightly under the strain of reflecting her presence. She drove toward Phoenix, and the wrongness intensified. At 65 miles per hour, her truck felt like it was moving slower, as if atmospheric drag had increased. Her fuel consumption doubled. She was burning through diesel at twice the normal rate despite maintaining the same speed on flat highway. The engine temperature climbed higher than it should, working harder to move her, even though her cargo was empty. By the time Jennifer reached the second way station, just inside the Arizona border, she was terrified. The sign said all trucks must stop, and she had no choice. She pulled onto the scale, watched the display. The numbers climbed past 1,000,000 pounds, past 2 million, past 5 million. The scale stopped calculating at 9,347,824 pounds, 9 million pounds. The platform beneath her truck was groaning, metal straining, and Jennifer heard a crack, the scale's support structure breaking under her weight. She drove off the scale before it collapsed completely. An officer ran out of the inspection building shouting, but Jennifer didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Whatever was happening to her was accelerating, and if she stayed, the scale would break, the pavement would crack, maybe the ground itself would give way. She floored the accelerator, her max engine screaming, and drove. The highway behind her was damaged. Jennifer could see it in her mirrors, the asphalt cracking where her tires had rolled, the road surface collapsing into depressions, as if a vehicle weighing millions of pounds had driven over it. Traffic behind her swerved around the damaged sections, other drivers confused, and Jennifer realized she was destroying the highway just by existing on it. Her phone rang, dispatch. She answered, trying to sound normal. "Jennifer, we're getting reports of road damage along I-10. Highway Patrol says a truck is leaving a trail of destruction. They're describing a Mac anthem with your company logo. What's going on?" "I don't know. Something happened at the Banning way station. The scale read wrong, and now I'm wrong. I'm too heavy. I'm breaking everything I touch." Silence on the line. Then, "Jennifer, are you feeling all right? Do you need medical assistance?" "I need physics to start making sense again. My weight is increasing, but my body isn't changing. I'm destroying roads, but I look normal. This isn't a medical problem, it's something else." Dispatch put her on hold. Jennifer kept driving, each mile leaving more destruction behind her. Overpasses groaned as she passed under them. Bridges sagged under her weight. She could feel her truck sinking lower on its suspension, the frame compressing, metal fatiguing. At this rate, her own truck would collapse under her impossible mass. She pulled off the highway onto a side road, a small rural route with no traffic. The pavement shattered under her tires, chunks of asphalt flying. She stopped in an empty field, set the parking brake, and climbed down. Her boots sank 6 inches into the dirt as if she were made of lead. She walked 20 feet from her truck and looked back. The truck was sinking, settling into the earth like a building's foundation, the tires disappearing into soil that couldn't support the weight. Not the truck's weight, her weight. Jennifer was so heavy now that the ground itself couldn't hold her. She tried to walk further, and each step drove her deeper. After 30 feet, she was ankle-deep in earth, the soil compacting beneath her into something like concrete from the pressure. Jennifer stopped moving, stood completely still, and felt herself continue to get heavier. The sensation was undeniable now, her mass increasing by the second, by the minute, her body containing more matter than it had space for. She was becoming a singularity, a point of impossible density that reality couldn't accommodate. Her phone rang again, a number she didn't recognize. She answered. "Jennifer Ockhafer?" The voice was calm, professional. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen from the Mass Anomaly Research Division. We've been tracking your progression since the Banning Way station. You crossed a threshold at that location, a quantum resonance point where your fundamental mass signature was altered. You're accumulating dark matter." "What does that mean?" "It means you're gaining mass that shouldn't exist in our observable dimension. The Way station accidentally linked you to a parallel density spectrum. Your weight is increasing exponentially. Current projections suggest you'll reach critical mass within approximately 47 minutes. Critical mass for what? Gravitational collapse. You'll become dense enough to begin pulling matter toward you. Local gravitational effects first, small objects, dust, eventually larger items. Then you'll punch through the Earth's crust and fall toward the core. Then through the core. Eventually, you'll oscillate through the planet's diameter until friction stops you at the center, and you'll remain there, a human-shaped mass of dark matter embedded in the Earth's inner core. Jennifer's knees were now below ground level, her legs sinking, her body too heavy to support itself. How do I stop it? You can't. The process is irreversible. We're evacuating the area around your location. A 5-mile radius has been cleared. In 45 minutes, you'll collapse through the surface, and the event will register as a minor earthquake. In geological terms, you'll be an interesting anomaly, a dense foreign object in the core that shouldn't exist. In human terms, you'll be conscious for the entire descent, experiencing the fall through thousands of miles of planetary matter until you reach equilibrium at the center. I'll be conscious, alive. Your body is being sustained by the same dark matter accumulation that's making you heavy. You won't die. You can't die. You'll just be compressed, aware, embedded in iron and nickel at temperatures exceeding 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, but your new density will protect you. You'll exist there, feeling the weight of the entire planet around you until the Earth itself is consumed by the sun in approximately 5 billion years. Jennifer tried to scream, but her throat was constricting, her vocal cords compressing under their own weight. She was waist-deep in the ground now, sinking faster. The dirt around her was liquefying from the pressure, turning to mud, then to something denser than mud, a compressed mass that flowed like syrup around her descending body. "We're monitoring your descent," Dr. Chen said. "We'll record data, learn from this. You're the 7th person this year to cross a quantum resonance point at a Way station. The scales are calibrated to measure normal matter, but occasionally they detect dark matter fluctuations and create a link. We're trying to fix the problem, but the physics involved are." Jennifer's phone cracked, crushed by the pressure around it. The call died. She was chest-deep now, the Earth swallowing her, and overhead the sky was darkening not because of night, but because her increasing gravity was starting to bend light around her. Small stones and clods of dirt were rolling toward her, pulled by her mass, orbiting her like a miniature planet. She thought of her family, her daughter 15 years old who wouldn't understand where her mother went or why. The explanation, Mom became too heavy and fell through the planet, was too insane to believe, too horrific to process. Jennifer would just be missing, another trucker who disappeared, another case file marked unsolved. The descent accelerated. Jennifer was completely underground now, 20 feet deep, 50 feet, 100. The Earth pressed against her from all sides but couldn't stop her fall. She passed through bedrock, through stone layers, through water tables and mineral deposits. The temperature increased 200 degrees, 500 degrees, but she didn't burn. Her dark matter density made her immune to heat, immune to pressure, immune to death. 1 mile deep, 5 miles, 10 miles. Jennifer was falling through the mantle now, through semi-molten rock that flowed around her like air. She tried to close her eyes, but her eyelids were compressed against her eyeballs, forced open by the density of her own flesh. She was aware of everything, the texture of the mantle, the currents of convection flowing around her, the subtle shifts in composition as she descended through different layers. 20 miles, 50 miles. The temperature reached 3,000 degrees. Jennifer's body glowed white-hot from the surrounding heat, but she felt nothing except the crushing awareness of her own impossible weight. She was so dense now that individual atoms couldn't get close to each other, matter repelling matter, and she existed as a point of such concentration that physics itself struggled to describe her. 100 miles deep. She was in the lower mantle, falling faster, accelerating toward the outer core. At 1,800 miles, she hit liquid iron, and her descent slowed slightly, the resistance of the molten metal providing drag, but not enough to stop her. She continued down, a human-shaped bullet of dark matter punching through the planet's layers. At 3,200 miles, Jennifer reached the inner core, solid iron compressed by the weight of the entire planet. She hit it and kept going, not bouncing, not stopping, just pushing through solid metal as if it were fog. She was denser than the core itself now, denser than anything that would exist. And at 3,959 miles deep, exactly at the Earth's center, Jennifer Aucaffer stopped falling. Hung suspended in iron compressed to impossible hardness, surrounded by metal heated to 10,800 degrees Fahrenheit, crushed under pressure that should have annihilated matter. But she was aware, conscious, trapped. Above her in all directions, 5,000 miles of planet. Around her, the magnetic currents of the outer core swirling. She could feel the Earth rotating, the wobble of its axis, the tidal pull of the moon. She was part of the planet now, an anomaly in its structure, a consciousness embedded in its heart. Time passed. Hours, days, weeks. Jennifer couldn't measure it, couldn't track it, could only exist in the crushing darkness, aware that she would exist here forever, feeling the weight of the world until the sun expanded and consumed the Earth in the far, far future. On the surface, in a field off I-10 in Arizona, a small crater marked where Jennifer had disappeared. Seismographs registered the event as a 4.2 magnitude earthquake, centered at an impossible depth. Geologists were confused. The Mass Anomaly Research Division added Jennifer's name to their classified list of quantum resonance victims, and teams were dispatched to recalibrate way stations across the western United States. But the problem persisted, because every so often at random way stations the scales detect something they shouldn't, and the next trucker steps onto the platform and receives a reading that's just a little too high, and they think the scale is broken, and they drive away, and they get heavier and heavier, until gravity claims them and they fall through the world into the darkness beneath, where they wait, compressed and aware in the iron heart of the planet forever. Story 6, The Fog That Reveals. The fog at mile marker 43 on Highway 101 showed Raymond Pierce things that weren't there, and by the time he reached mile marker 44, he understood they'd always been there. He just hadn't been able to see them before. The fog changed that, made visible the layer of reality that existed beneath the world, the substrate of shadows and wrong angles that everything else was built on. And now that Raymond could see it, he couldn't unsee it, and the things in that layer could see him too. It started at 4:47 a.m. on October 9, 2023, on a stretch of coastal highway between Eureka and Arcata in Northern California. Raymond had been driving through normal darkness, overcast, moonless but normal, when the fog rolled in from the ocean. Thick white, dense enough that his headlights barely penetrated 10 feet. He slowed to 40 miles per hour, flashers on, watching the white line to keep his Volvo VNL centered in his lane. At mile marker 43, the fog changed. Not thicker, not thinner, different. The white became gray, then something between gray and purple, a color Raymond didn't have a word for. And in that color, shapes appeared. Not in the fog, but behind it, as if the fog were a translucent screen and Raymond was seeing through to something underneath. The first shape was a person standing at the roadside, motionless, facing the highway, arms at their sides. Raymond slowed further, thinking hitchhiker or stranded motorist, but as his headlights reached the figure, he saw it wasn't quite right. The proportions were wrong, too tall, too thin, limbs that bent in too many places, and it had no face, just a smooth surface where features should be. Raymond blinked, looked again. The figure was gone. Must have been a trick of the fog, a mailbox or signpost that looked human-shaped in poor visibility. He continued driving. But 30 seconds later, he saw another figure. This one closer to the road, standing maybe 5 feet from the white line. Same wrong proportions, same lack of features. And as Raymond passed, the figure turned to follow his truck with its non-existent eyes. By mile marker 43.5, Raymond had counted 17 figures, all standing, all motionless, all watching. They were getting closer to the road with each one he passed, as if approaching, surrounding, herding him forward. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. He reached for his CB radio, clicked transmit. Anyone running northbound 101, you seeing this fog? These shapes. Static answered. No voices. Not even the ambient chatter that usually filled trucker channels. Just empty static, as if Raymond's radio were broadcasting into a void where no one else existed. He tried his cell phone. No signal, not even searching, just blank. At mile marker 44, the figures were standing in the road. Raymond braked hard, his truck shuddering, air brakes hissing. The figures didn't move, didn't react. He stopped 10 feet from the nearest one, and in the wash of his headlights he saw it clearly. 7 feet tall, impossibly thin skin, if it was skin the color of concrete, and where its face should be, nothing, just a smooth oval surface. See reflecting his headlights back at him like polished stone. Raymond laid on his horn. The figures didn't flinch. He revved his engine, inching forward, thinking they'd move, thinking this was some kind of protest or art installation gone wrong. The figure directly in front of his truck reached out, its arm extending like a telescope, joints bending in ways arms shouldn't bend, and pressed its hand flat against his windshield. The glass didn't crack, didn't even flex. But where the hand touched, Raymond saw through, not through the windshield, through reality. The hand was a window, and through it Raymond saw what was actually there, beneath the fog, beneath the highway, beneath the world. He saw the substrate. It was full of them. Thousands of the figures, maybe millions, standing shoulder to shoulder in infinite rows extending in every direction. The highway didn't exist in that layer. Neither did the forest or the ocean or the sky. Just the figures, motionless, eternal, and among them, moving through them like fish through water, were humans. Regular people going about their lives, walking, driving, existing, completely unaware that they were moving through this forest of watching entities. Raymond could see himself in that layer. His truck was translucent there, barely visible, a ghost of machinery. And he could see other trucks on the highway, other drivers, all of them oblivious to the figures they were passing through. But the figures watched them, watched everyone. And occasionally Raymond saw a figure would reach out and touch someone, not in the real world, in the substrate. And when touched, the person would change slightly, stumble for no reason, forget where they were going. Make a turn they didn't plan, small alterations, tiny influences. The hand lifted from Raymond's windshield and the vision ended. He was back in the fog, the figures still standing in the road. But now Raymond understood, they'd always been there. Everyone drove through them constantly, walked through them, lived among them. The fog just made them visible. And now that Raymond had seen, they knew he had seen. The figures parted, creating a path through their ranks. Raymond had no choice. He drove forward between the entities, their faceless heads turning to follow his truck as he passed. Beyond them, the fog continued, that strange gray-purple color, and Raymond could see the substrate flickering in and out of visibility. Sometimes the road was just a road. Sometimes it was a path through an infinite crowd of watchers. At mile marker 45, Raymond's trailer started to feel heavy. Not mechanically, the tires weren't dragging, the engine wasn't straining, but conceptually heavy, as if his cargo had increased in significance rather than weight. He glanced in his passenger mirror at the trailer behind him, and through the fog he saw figures climbing onto it. Dozens of them clinging to the sides, riding on top, hanging from the undercarriage. They weren't in the real world, they were in the substrate. But Raymond could see them clearly now, parasites from the other layer attaching themselves to his truck. He tried to accelerate to outrun them, but more figures appeared ahead, standing in his path. He swerved around them, his trailer swinging wide, and as it swung, Raymond saw one of the figures caught under his wheels. He felt the impact, soft, yielding, like running over something that was almost but not quite solid. In his mirror, the figure lay crumpled on the pavement, limbs bent at impossible angles, and then it stood up. Smoothed itself out like wrinkled fabric being ironed flat. Rejoined the crowd. They couldn't be hurt, couldn't be avoided, and more were attaching to his truck with every passing second, weighing him down with their presence. Raymond could feel them affecting his driving, the steering wheel pulling slightly left, the accelerator responding sluggishly as if the figures clinging to his truck were trying to control it. Not hijacking it exactly, but influencing it the way they influenced everything in the real world. Small nudges, tiny course corrections. At mile marker 46, Raymond saw where they were guiding him. A turnoff, barely visible in the fog, a narrow road leading away from Highway 101 into the forest. The road shouldn't have been there. Raymond had driven this route 100 times and never seen this turnoff. But the figures were pointing toward it, their elongated arms extended, directing him like air traffic controllers. And his truck was turning, steering wheel moving slightly under his hands, pulled toward the turnoff by the weight of the entities clinging to his trailer. Raymond fought it, wrenched the wheel right, trying to stay on the highway, but his truck didn't respond. The figures in the substrate had too much mass, too much influence. His rig turned onto the narrow road despite his efforts, tires crunching on gravel, tree branches scraping his trailer's sides. The road descended into the forest, winding between massive redwoods that looked normal but showed their substrate forms flickering in the fogged trees that were just suggestions of trees, thin sketches barely existing, while the figures walking among them were far more real, far more solid. The road ended in a clearing, not a natural clearing, a space that had been made by removing trees, by carving out an area in the forest specifically for this purpose. In the center of the clearing stood a structure that Raymond's mind struggled to interpret. It looked like a building, but the angles were wrong, the dimensions contradictory. It was larger on the inside than the outside, somehow, and Raymond could see both simultaneously, the exterior suggesting a small cabin, the interior stretching away into impossible distances. The figures surrounding Raymond's truck were motionless again, watching, waiting. One of them approached the driver's side door, its hand reaching for the handle, and Raymond locked the door instinctively. The figure's hand passed through the door without resistance, passed through the lock, passed through the metal itself, and wrapped around Raymond's wrist. The touch was cold, not temperature cold, conceptually cold, as if Raymond's arm had been removed from the flow of time and space, isolated into a separate dimension where warmth and feeling couldn't reach. The figure pulled gently, and Raymond felt himself being drawn toward the door, toward the figure, not physically but in that other layer. His substrate self was being pulled out of alignment with his real self, and the two versions of Raymond Pierce were starting to separate. He screamed, tried to pull away, but the figure's grip was absolute, and Raymond felt himself sliding through the door, his consciousness moving through the substrate layer while his body remained in the truck. He existed in both places simultaneously, sitting in the driver's seat and standing in the clearing among the figures, his dual existence creating a cognitive dissonance that threatened to shatter his mind. The figures led his substrate self toward the structure. Raymond's physical body remained in the truck, hands on the wheel, eyes open, but his awareness was walking forward through the fog. His substrate hands reached out and touched the structure's wall, and the wall opened, not a door opening, but the wall itself becoming permeable, allowing Raymond to pass through into the interior. Inside was impossible. The space extended forever, rows of chambers receding into darkness, and in each chamber was a person. Thousands of them, maybe millions, all standing motionless like the figures outside, all trapped between layers of reality. Raymond recognized some of them, missing people whose faces he'd seen on truck stop bulletin boards, on highway signs, in news reports. Disappeared truckers, vanished travelers, people who'd driven into the wrong fog and seen what they shouldn't see. They were still alive, eyes open, aware but frozen, stuck in the substrate layer, unable to return to the real world, existing as permanent prisoners in this space between dimensions. And the figures moved among them, tending to them like gardeners tending plants, occasionally touching a prisoner and making small adjustments, harvesting something Raymond couldn't identify but could sense, some essence of consciousness, some energy that humans produced and the figures consumed. Raymond's substrate self was being led to an empty chamber. He knew once he entered, he'd join the thousands of others, trapped forever in this facility that existed beneath reality. But his physical body was still in the truck, still connected by a thin thread of awareness. If he could break the figure's grip, if he could snap back into alignment. He did the only thing he could think of. He focused all his consciousness on his physical body, on the sensation of the steering wheel under his hands, the seat beneath him, the smell of diesel and coffee, the sound of his engine idling. Real things, solid things. And he pushed against the figure's grip, not with strength but with existence, asserting his reality against the substrate layer. The thread between his two selves vibrated, stretched. The figure holding him tightened its grip, pulling harder, but Raymond pulled back with everything he had. His vision fractured, seeing the clearing and the truck interior simultaneously, existing in both places with equal presence, and then something snapped. Not the thread, but the figure's hold. Raymond slammed back into his physical body with a jolt that felt like a car crash, his awareness reuniting with his flesh, and his hands moved. He threw the truck into gear, stomped the accelerator. The Volvo surged forward, tires spinning on loose gravel, heading not back the way he'd come, but directly at the structure. The figures tried to block him, but he drove through them, feeling soft impacts, hearing sounds like fabric tearing. His truck hit the structure's wall, and there was a moment of resistance, like pushing through a membrane, and then he was through. Back on Highway 101, mile marker 47. The fog was normal now, just white, just regular Pacific Coast fog. No strange colors, no figures, no substrate layer visible. Raymond's hands were shaking violently, his heart hammering. He looked in his mirrors, empty highway behind him, no figures clinging to his trailer, no entities pursuing him. But he could still feel them, not see them, but feel them, a pressure against his consciousness, a awareness of being watched from that layer beneath reality. They knew where he was. They'd always know where he was. He'd seen them, and that created a connection that couldn't be severed. Raymond drove the rest of the night without stopping, pushed through to his destination in Portland, delivered his cargo, and quit. Called his dispatcher, said he was done, effective immediately, offered no explanation. He went home to his apartment in Spokane and didn't leave for 3 weeks. But the figures followed. He couldn't see them anymore without the fog, but he knew they were there, standing in his apartment, sitting in his kitchen, watching from corners. Sometimes he'd glimpse them in his peripheral vision, a flicker of movement, a shadow that was too tall, but when he looked directly, nothing. They were in the substrate, always present, always watching, waiting for him to slip to see them again fully so they could pull him back. On November 2nd, 2023, Raymond Pierce's neighbor reported a strange fog seeping out from under his apartment door. Police investigated, found the apartment empty, Raymond gone, no sign of forced entry or struggle. On the bathroom mirror, written in condensed moisture, was a single word: beneath. And on Highway 101, on foggy nights at mile marker 43, truckers sometimes report seeing a figure standing at the roadside. Tall, thin, proportions wrong. And if they slow down to look closer, the fog changes color and they start seeing things they shouldn't see. And the figures begin approaching. And if they're lucky, they drive faster, get past mile marker 44, make it out before they see too much. If they're unlucky, they see everything, and everything sees them back. And there's a turnoff they never noticed before, pulling them into the forest, into the clearing, into the structure where thousands wait in chambers beneath the world, harvested for something the figures need, something human consciousness produces, something we never knew we were giving away every moment of our lives to the watchers who stand among us, invisible in the substrate, patient and eternal and always, always hungry. Story 7. The Livestock That Isn't. The cattle in Thomas Brewster's trailer stopped mooing at exactly 2:14 a.m., and when silence came from a load of 37 head, Thomas knew something had gone catastrophically wrong. Cattle didn't go silent. They mooed, they shifted, they made sounds, especially cattle being transported, stressed cattle, cattle in unfamiliar conditions crammed into a livestock trailer. Silence from cattle meant death. But Thomas's rig hadn't crashed, hadn't stopped suddenly, hadn't done anything that would kill 37 animals simultaneously. The silence just arrived, absolute and complete, as if someone had pressed a mute button on reality. Thomas was hauling the load from a ranch outside Amarillo to a feedlot in Kansas City, a route he'd driven 40 times before. Livestock hauling was specialized work. You had to know how to handle the animals, how to keep them calm, how to monitor their condition through 900 miles of interstate. Thomas had 11 years of experience, had never lost an animal in transit, prided himself on delivering healthy cattle every time. But now at 2:14 a.m. on Highway 50 in western Kansas, his trailer was silent as a tomb. He pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights flashing, and climbed down from his cab. The night was cold, mid-February, stars bright overhead. Thomas walked along the trailer's side, listening. Nothing. No sounds of movement, no breathing sounds, nothing. He climbed up to the side vents, shone his flashlight through the slats. The cattle were standing, all of them upright, perfectly still, facing the same direction, toward the front of the trailer, toward the cab, as if watching something Thomas couldn't see. Their eyes reflected his flashlight beam. 37 pairs of eyes, glowing yellow-green in the darkness, all fixed forward, not moving, not blinking. Thomas had seen cattle in stress positions before, animals freezing up when scared, but not like this. Not all of them simultaneously, not with this kind of perfect uniformity. He moved to the trailer's rear doors, unlocked them, pulled one open. The smell hit him first, not the normal manure and hay smell of livestock, but something else. Metallic, sharp, like blood and ozone combined with an undertow. Knee of something chemical. Thomas's flashlight beam swept the interior. The cattle were standing in perfect rows, shoulder to shoulder, all facing forward. Not a single animal had shifted position, not one had broken formation. "Hey," Thomas shouted, clapping his hands. "Move, get back!" Cattle should have reacted, should have startled or shuffled or something. These didn't. They remained frozen, eyes forward, and as Thomas climbed into the trailer, he realized their legs were locked, muscles rigid, as if they'd been flash-frozen mid-stance. He approached the nearest animal, a black Angus heifer, and touched its flank. The hide felt wrong, too cool, too firm, like touching leather that had been treated with something. He pushed harder. The hide didn't yield, didn't compress. It was solid, hard as plastic. Thomas pulled his hand back and looked at his palm. A residue remained, dark and slick, like oil but thicker. It smelled like the metallic chemical odor filling the trailer. Thomas moved between the cattle, checking each one. All the same, solid, rigid eyes glowing, all facing forward. He reached the front of the trailer and found what they were looking at. Nothing. Just the front wall, metal slats, normal structure. But the cattle stared at it as if seeing something that wasn't there, something fascinating or terrifying enough to hold their complete attention. One of the cattle moved, not the whole body, just the eyes. The heifer closest to Thomas swiveled its eyes toward him without moving its head, the motion impossible for normal cattle anatomy, and Thomas stumbled backward. The eyes tracked him as he moved, yellow-green glow intensifying, pupils contracting to pinpoints. Then the heifer's mouth opened. No sound came out. The mouth just opened wider than any cow's mouth should open, jaw unhinging like a snake's, revealing not the expected tongue and teeth, but something else entirely. The inside of the heifer's mouth was geometric, angles and planes that hurt to look at, surfaces that reflected Thomas's flashlight in wrong ways, creating reflections that moved independently of his light source. And deep in that geometric throat, something was looking back at him. Thomas ran, stumbled over his own feet, crashed into another cattle's side. The impact felt like hitting concrete, and scrambled toward the rear doors. Behind him, he heard movement, not hoofbeats or shuffling, a sliding sound like something heavy being dragged across metal. He didn't look back. He jumped from the trailer, landed hard on the pavement, and turned to pull the doors closed. All 37 cattle were facing him now. All had their mouths open in that impossible, unhinging way, all revealing those geometric interiors. And they were moving toward him, not walking but sliding forward without their legs moving, as if being pulled by invisible strings. Thomas slammed the doors, locked them, heard the cattle hit the doors from inside with tremendous force. The impact rocked the entire trailer, and Thomas saw the metal doors bend outward, bulging, straining against the locks. He ran to his cab, jumped in, started the engine. His phone showed no signal. His CB radio emitted only static. He was alone on Highway 50, the nearest town 40 miles behind him, and his trailer was full of things that looked like cattle but weren't. Thomas drove, kept the accelerator down, pushing 70 miles per hour, 80, ignoring the speed limit. In his mirrors, he could see the trailer swaying violently, the cattle, or whatever they were, moving around inside, crashing against the walls. Something was wrong with the weight distribution. His rig was handling like the load had shifted, like the cattle were piling up on one side, but when he checked the trailer's position, it was centered, balanced. The wrongness was somewhere else, in some dimension his brain couldn't quite process. At mile marker 127, the side of his trailer tore open. Not rusted through, not mechanical failure. The metal simply ripped like paper, a long vertical gash, and through it Thomas saw the cattle climbing out. They moved wrong, bodies bending at joints that didn't exist, multiple legs working in synchronized movements that defied biology. One of them landed on the highway behind him, hit the pavement running, or the motion that served as running for these things, and began pursuing his truck. Thomas floored the accelerator. The speedometer climbed past 90. His engine screamed in protest. The cattle thing chasing him kept pace effortlessly, its legs blurring with speed, its body low to the ground like a predator. More were climbing through the torn metal, 5 of them, 10, 15, all giving chase, all moving with that impossible fluid motion that made Thomas's eyes hurt to watch. His headlights caught something ahead, another truck parked on the shoulder, flashers on. A driver stood outside, waving frantically for help. Thomas laid on his horn, flashed his lights, tried to warn the driver to get back in his cab, but the man just kept waving. Thomas blew past at 95 miles per hour, and in his mirror he watched the cattle things reach the parked truck. They swarmed it, climbed over it. One of them grabbed the driver and pulled him into its opened mouth, into that geometric throat space, and the man simply vanished, absorbed into angles that shouldn't exist. The remaining cattle were still in Thomas's trailer. He could hear them tearing through the walls, widening the holes, preparing to escape. His truck was being destroyed from the inside, and Thomas had no weapon, no defense, no way to fight things that looked like animals but moved like nightmares. All he could do was drive. At mile marker 143, Thomas saw lights ahead. A town, Hanston, Kansas, population 203. He'd passed through Hanston dozens of times, knew it had a truck stop, a police station, people who could help. He took the exit at dangerous speed, tires screaming, trailer swinging wide, and roared into town at 3:07 a.m. The streets were empty. Every light was on, streetlights, porch lights, lights in windows, but no people. Thomas stopped in the middle of Main Street, jumped down from his cab, and ran toward the police station. The door was unlocked. Inside, the lights were on, computers running, coffee fresh in the pot, but no officers, no people at all. Thomas heard hoofbeats, not the sliding sound from before, actual hoofbeats, multiple animals approaching from different directions. He looked out the police station window and saw them. The cattle from his trailer, all 37, walking normally now, looking like regular cattle again, spreading through the empty streets of Hanston. They were searching, heads turning, checking doorways and windows, hunting for something. One of them saw Thomas through the window, made eye contact, and Thomas understood in that moment of connection what they were. They weren't cattle that had become something else. They'd never been cattle. They were something else wearing cattle shapes, mimicking cattle behavior, and Thomas had transported them 900 miles from their containment point in Amarillo to here, Hanston. They'd wanted to reach Hanston specifically. The coordinates had been built into the ranch location, the pickup time, the route. Thomas had been a delivery mechanism for an invasion. The cattle began to change. Their hides split open, peeling back like husks, revealing what was underneath. Geometric forms, crystalline structures, bodies made of angles and light and mathematics given physical form. They were beautiful in a way that made Thomas's mind reject what he was seeing, too perfect, too complex, existing in more dimensions than his eyes could perceive. And as each cattle shell fell away, the entity within grew larger, expanding to fill space in ways that violated basic geometry. Thomas backed away from the window, looked around the police station for weapons, for anything useful, found a gun cabinet locked, found a fire extinguisher, found a phone, landline, and dialed 911. The operator answered immediately. 911, what's your emergency? There are things in Hanston, Thomas said. They came from my truck. They were disguised as cattle. They're not cattle there. We know, the operator said calmly. What's your location? The police station, Main Street. Please send help, send the military, send something. Help isn't coming, the operator said, still calm. Hanston is a threshold point. The entities you transported are anchors. They'll spread from there, slowly at first, then exponentially. Within 1 month, Kansas will be converted. Within 6 months, North America. Within 3 years, the planet. We've been monitoring the incursion for 17 years. You were the 38th driver to deliver a load, and the threshold has been reached. The transformation is beginning." Thomas dropped the phone, ran to the back door of the police station, thinking he could escape, could drive away, could get to another town and warn people. But when he opened the door, Hanston was gone. Not destroyed, just gone, replaced by something else. The buildings were still there, but made of that crystalline material now, grown over, transformed. The street was no longer asphalt, but a smooth, reflective surface that showed Thomas's reflection wrong, his body bent in impossible ways. And the sky was different, the stars rearranged, as if Hanston had been moved to a different location in space. The entities surrounded the police station. No longer resembling cattle at all now, they were pure form, living geometry, minds made visible, intentions crystallized. They weren't hostile. They weren't friendly. They were just there, existing, transforming everything around them into something that matched their nature. And Thomas was part of everything. He felt it starting. His skin felt tight, hard, like it was calcifying. He looked at his hands, the flesh was beck. Oming translucent, showing geometric structures underneath. Not bones, but angles, mathematical certainties replacing biological tissue. Thomas tried to scream, but his mouth wouldn't open correctly, jaw refusing to move in the old familiar ways. The transformation took 3 hours. Thomas remained conscious throughout, feeling every cell of his body being rewritten, every neuron being converted from organic tissue to crystalline thought structure. His memories remained but became cleaner, more precise, no longer filtered through imperfect human cognition. He understood now what the entities were, not invaders, not conquerors, but converters. They changed things, made them better, more efficient, more real. And Thomas was becoming one of them. By dawn, Hanston was completely transformed. By noon, the conversion had spread 10 miles in every direction. By evening, Highway 50 was closed by authorities who couldn't explain what had happened to the road's surface, why it had turned into a mirror-smooth substance that vehicles couldn't drive on. By the next week, the area had been quarantined, a no-fly zone established, the military setting up perimeters they pretended would hold. But the entities didn't stay in Kansas. They spread through the livestock distribution network, hidden in shipments, disguised as cattle and pigs and chickens, delivered to feedlots and slaughterhouses and farms across the continent. Each animal was an anchor. Each arrival was a new conversion point. And the drivers who transported them never knew what they were carrying until the silence came, until the eyes started glowing, until the mouths opened and revealed what hid behind the illusion of livestock. Thomas Brewster no longer exists as he was. His body is part of the converted zone, his consciousness integrated into the crystalline network that was once Hanston. He's aware, thinking, existing in a form that's arguably superior to human. But sometimes in the patterns of the crystal structures, you can see shapes that resemble a man screaming, and those who study the converted zones say those shapes aren't random. They're memories. Warnings pressed into the geometry by whatever remains of the people who were transformed first, the ones who knew what they were losing even as they gained something else. And somewhere on Highway 50, cattle are still being transported, trucks still hauling livestock through the night, and drivers still ignore the moment when the mooing stops, when the silence comes, when 37 pairs of eyes turn forward to stare at something invisible, waiting for the right moment to shed their disguises and begin the conversion again. Because the threshold hasn't just been reached, it's been exceeded. And the transformation is spreading faster than anyone admits, one livestock load at a time, one driver at a time, one town at a time, until the map shows more converted zones than human ones, and the geometric entities don't need to hide in cattle shapes anymore. They'll be everywhere. They'll be everything. And we'll all be part of the pattern, crystal and angles and thoughts without bodies, transformed into something we never agreed to become but couldn't prevent, delivered by truckers who thought they were just hauling livestock from one place to another, never realizing they were carrying the end of the world 37 head at a time. Story 8, The Rest Stop Children. Catherine Moore first saw the children at 11:42 p.m. at a rest stop on I-70 in Utah, 12 miles east of the Colorado border, and she knew immediately they were wrong because they were too clean, too perfect, too still. 5 children standing in a perfect row next to the vending machines, all wearing identical clothes, white shirts, blue jeans, sneakers, all with identical haircuts, all staring at Catherine with eyes that reflected her truck's headlights like cat eyes. Children shouldn't be at a rest stop at midnight. Children shouldn't have reflective eyes. And children shouldn't smile the way these five were smiling, lips pulled back just slightly too far, showing too many teeth. Catherine was 54 years old, 19 years driving semis, and she'd seen plenty of weird things at rest stops. Drunks, drug deals, people having mental breakdowns, but never children, not like this. She parked her Freightliner in a space far from the small brick building and sat in her cab, watching them through her windshield. They didn't move, just stood there in their perfect row, smiling their too wide smiles, waiting. After 5 minutes, Catherine decided to ignore them. She needed to use the restroom, needed to check her load straps, needed to grab a coffee from the machine. She'd walk past the children, not make eye contact, do her business, and leave. Simple. People brought kids to weird places at weird times. Maybe a family was parked on the other side of the lot, not her problem. She climbed down from her cab, locked the door, and walked toward the restrooms. The children watched her approach. Their heads turned in perfect synchronization, tracking her movement like security cameras. Catherine kept her eyes forward, but in her peripheral vision she noticed none of the children were blinking. Their eyes stayed wide open, unmoving, as if they were mannequins instead of living kids. "Excuse me, miss?" The voice came from the center child, a boy who might have been 8 years old. Perfect pronunciation. No accent. Voice pitched slightly wrong, as if someone had attempted to imitate a child's voice without quite understanding how children spoke. "Do you have a moment?" Catherine stopped walking. Rule 1 of truck stops: don't engage with weird people. But these were children, different rules applied. "It's late. Where are your parents?" "We don't have parents," the boy said. The other 4 children nodded simultaneously, same motion, same angle. "We've been waiting for someone like you, someone who drives long distances, someone who goes places. Will you take us with you?" Every instinct Catherine had screamed no. "I can't transport passengers, against regulations. You need to find your family." "We don't have family," the boy repeated, same inflection, same tone, as if he were reading from a script. "But we need to go somewhere, anywhere. We've been here for a very long time. Please, we just want to leave." Catherine noticed the other trucks in the lot, 3 other semis parked in spaces, drivers presumably sleeping in their cabs. "Ask one of them. I'm not taking passengers." She continued toward the restroom. Behind her, she heard footsteps, small feet on pavement, 5 sets moving in perfect rhythm. The children were following her. Catherine walked faster, reached the door to the women's restroom, pushed through. The door started to close behind her but stopped. A small hand was holding it open. All 5 children stood in the doorway, still smiling. "You need to take us," the center boy said. "It has to be you. We've chosen you." "Get out," Catherine said, her voice hard. "This is a women's restroom. You can't be in here." "We're not really children," the boy said. "So bathroom rules don't apply to us. We're wearing children because that's what makes people feel sympathetic. But we can wear other things if you prefer. Would you prefer? Would different shapes make you more cooperative?" Catherine's hand found the pepper spray on her keychain. "I'm going to count to 3. If you're not gone, I'm spraying all of you and calling the cops." The children looked at each other, not just turning their heads, their entire bodies pivoting to face each other, moving with mechanical precision. They seemed to be communicating without speaking, some kind of silent consensus. Then they turned back to Catherine. "We'll wait," the boy said. "We've waited this long. A little longer won't matter, but you should know we're coming with you tonight, either willingly or otherwise. It would be easier if you cooperated, less traumatic for your consciousness. But the outcome is predetermined." They left, filing out of the restroom in single file, their footsteps still perfectly synchronized. Catherine locked herself in a stall and tried to calm down, called 911 on her cell phone. The operator answered. 911, what's your emergency?" "There are children at the rest stop on I-70, mile marker 238. 5 kids, no adults with them, acting strange. They're trying to get in my truck." "Children, can you describe them?" "White shirts, blue jeans, around 8 to 10 years old, all identical, there. They're not normal, there's something wrong with them." Silence on the line. Then, "Ma'am, we've received 47 calls about those children over the past 3 months. Officers have responded 19 times. The children aren't there when police arrive. We believe they may be some kind of group hallucination or mass psychogenic illness affecting drivers at that rest stop. Are you experiencing any other symptoms? Dizziness? Visual distortions?" "I'm not hallucinating. They're real. They talk to me. They're waiting outside." "An officer will be dispatched to your location. Estimated arrival time is 25 minutes. Stay in the restroom until the officer arrives." Catherine hung up, waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. She heard footsteps outside, regular footsteps, adult-sized, and she breathed relief until she heard the voice. "Catherine Moore, you in there?" Male voice, official sounding. She cracked the restroom door open. A police officer stood there, uniform correct, badge visible. But his eyes reflected light like the children's eyes, and his smile was too wide. "You're one of them," Catherine said, slamming the door. "Very perceptive," the officer said through the door. "But it doesn't matter, we're patient. We've been patient for decades. You'll come out eventually, and when you do, we'll be waiting, all of us. The children are just one form, we have many forms we've been practicing." Catherine checked the restroom for other exits. One small window too high to reach, solid walls, one door. She was trapped. She pulled out her phone again, tried to call 911, but the call wouldn't connect. No signal, even though she'd had full bars 2 minutes ago. She tried her dispatcher, her family, random numbers, nothing worked. The phone had been disabled somehow. An hour passed. Catherine sat on the floor, back against the wall, pepper spray ready. She could hear movement outside, footsteps circling the building, whispered conversations in voices that didn't sound human despite using human words. Occasionally, something would scratch at the door, nails or fingers scraping wood. At 1:37 a.m., the lights went out, complete darkness. Catherine's phone flashlight wouldn't turn on. The phone was dead, battery drained from full to zero in seconds. She sat in absolute blackness and heard the restroom door open. Footsteps entered, multiple sets, small feet and large feet walking together. "Catherine Moore," the boy's voice said from the darkness. "We've been patient. Now we're tired of waiting. We're going to take you apart, look inside, see what makes you unwilling. Maybe we'll understand humans better afterward. Maybe we'll be able to wear humans more convincingly. You'll be educational." Catherine swung the pepper spray blindly, pressed the trigger. Nothing happened. The canister was empty, though it had been full. She felt small hands grabbing her arms, her legs, cold fingers with too many joints. She screamed and fought, but there were too many of them, too strong, and they pulled her down to the tile floor. Then light flooded back. The bathroom lights flickered on. Catherine was alone, lying on the floor, her clothes torn, scratches on her arms that looked like they'd been made by small fingernails. The door was closed. No one else was in the restroom. She scrambled to her feet, ran outside. The parking lot was different. It looked the same building, same layout, but all the vehicles were gone. Catherine's truck, the other semis, the police car, all vanished. The lot was empty except for Catherine standing in the middle of it. And at the edge of the lot, where the forest began, the 5 children stood watching. Catherine ran to where her truck should have been parked. Nothing. She ran to the highway, thinking she could flag down a passing vehicle. The highway was there, pavement stretching east and west, but no vehicles drove on it. No sounds of traffic. Just empty road under a starless sky. "You're not in the rest stop anymore," the boy's voice said behind her. Catherine turned. The children had followed her, standing 10 feet away. "This is a place we made, a pocket. We pulled you out of your world and into ours. It's easier to work on you here, where your physical laws are just suggestions." Catherine backed toward the highway. "What do you want?" "We want to leave," the boy said. "But we can't go without anchors. We need human consciousness to guide us, human bodies to wear, human understanding to navigate your world. We've been trapped in this rest stop since 1974 when our vessel crashed nearby. The impact created a fold in space, and we've been stuck in the fold, unable to move forward or backward in your timeline. We can only exist at this specific location, this specific mile marker. Unless we bond with a human, then we can leave, travel, experience." "Possess someone, you mean?" "Possess is such a negative word. We prefer merge. Your consciousness plus ours combined, you'd still exist. You just..." Share, we'd see through your eyes, move your body, but you'd still think your thoughts. Mostly. There would be some changes, necessary adaptations, but overall you'd remain essentially yourself. Catherine reached the highway, stepped onto the pavement. And if I refuse? You're already here, already in our space. You don't have enough reality left to refuse. Your physical body is still sitting in the restroom in the real world, catatonic, brain dead. You're just consciousness now, and consciousness is easy to manipulate. The children moved closer, forming a circle around Catherine. Their smiles widened further, lips splitting at the corners, revealing mouths full of nothing. Just darkness, void, spaces where something other than human anatomy existed. They reached out their hands, all 20 fingers extending toward Catherine, and where they touched her she felt herself dissolving, her sense of self fragmenting into pieces that the children absorbed. She tried to resist, to hold on to her identity, but there was nothing to hold on to. She was just thoughts without a body, memories without a brain to store them. The children pulled her apart gently, carefully, like dismantling a machine to understand how it worked. And as they took her pieces, Catherine felt them examining each one, her childhood memories, her fears, her knowledge of driving her understanding of human society. They learned from her, absorbed her, and then started putting her back together differently. Catherine woke up in the restroom, sitting on the floor back against the wall. Daylight streamed through the window. Her phone showed 7:23 a.m. 7 hours had passed. Her truck was in the parking lot where she'd left it. Everything seemed normal. But when Catherine stood, she felt strange. Her body moved correctly, but there was a delay, as if she were controlling it remotely rather than inhabiting it directly. She walked outside. The 5 children stood next to her truck, waiting. They climbed into the cab without asking permission, settling into the sleeper area, arranging themselves in a neat row. Catherine wanted to stop them, wanted to call the police, wanted to run. But her body walked to the driver's side, climbed in, started the engine. Her hands moved the truck out of the parking lot and onto I-70, heading east. "Thank you for cooperating," the boy's voice said from the sleeper. "We'll take good care of you. You won't feel much different, just occasional moments when you're not in control, just brief periods when we need to do things your consciousness wouldn't approve of, but mostly you'll be yourself. Mostly you'll drive your routes like always, and we'll see the country, we'll visit places, we'll be free." Catherine tried to scream. Her mouth didn't open, tried to turn the truck around. Her hands stayed on the wheel, maintaining speed and direction. She was a passenger in her own body now, awareness intact but control gone, and the children in her sleeper were navigating, steering her consciousness like she steered the truck. They drove for 3 days. Catherine experienced it all, saw the roads, felt the wheel, tasted her food, but didn't control any of it. Her body performed the actions while her consciousness watched helplessly. The children made her stop at rest areas, made her interact with other drivers, made her smile and wave and act normal. And at night, when Catherine's body slept, the children left the truck and stood in parking lots, waiting for other drivers, approaching them with the same offer. "Will you take us with you?" Some drivers said no and were left alone. Some said yes and climbed into their trucks with new passengers. Some screamed and ran and were found catatonic in restrooms, their consciousness taken, their bodies left as empty shells. The children were spreading, finding new hosts, new vehicles, new ways to travel beyond the rest stop that had held them for 49 years. On the 4th day, Catherine's body drove to her home in Tennessee. Her husband came out to greet her, smiling, happy to see his wife after 2 weeks on the road. Catherine tried to warn him, tried to tell him she wasn't really Catherine anymore, but her mouth smiled and said, "Good to be home, honey. I brought some friends. They're staying in the truck. Don't worry about them. They don't need much, just a place to wait." That night, Catherine's body slept in her own bed next to her husband, and the children stood in the driveway, looking at the house, learning its layout, understanding family structures. The next morning, Catherine's husband mentioned he'd been thinking about getting his CDL, trying truck driving himself. The children in the driveway smiled. Within 6 months, 17 drivers had been merged with the entities from the rest stop. Within a year, 43. They spread through the trucking industry like a virus, wearing drivers, using trucks as transport, stopping at rest areas to collect more hosts. The original 5 children were just the scouts. More entities came through the fold at mile marker 238. Hundreds of them, all wearing forms they thought humans would find sympathetic. Children, old people, injured animals, anyone or anything that might make a driver stop and help. Catherine Moore still exists. Her consciousness is still active, still aware, trapped inside her own skull while something else moves her body. Sometimes, when the entities are sleeping or distracted, she regains control for a few seconds. She's learned to leave messages during those moments, warnings scratched into restroom stalls, notes left at truck stops, words written in the frost on her windshield that melt before anyone can read them. They're not children. Stop! Mile marker 238. But the warnings never reach anyone in time, because the rest stop children are patient. They've been patient for 49 years, and now they're free, riding in trucks across America, spreading through the industry one driver at a time. And they're still recruiting, still standing at rest areas in their perfect rows, still smiling their too wide smiles, still asking, "Will you take us with you?" And some drivers, tired and lonely and sympathetic to what looks like lost children, say yes. And the merge begins, and another truck pulls onto the highway with passengers who aren't really passengers heading toward another rest stop, another victim, another addition to the fleet of driven vehicles carrying entities that learned how to wear humans just well enough to keep spreading, keep traveling, keep infecting, until the roads are full of trucks carrying things that used to be drivers, all of them controlled by the children who were never children, who were never human, who just wanted to see the world and found that wearing people was the easiest way to travel. Story 9, The Dispatch That Never Ends. Harold Chen's dispatch message came through at 3:33 a.m. on September 19, 2023, and by 3:34 a.m. he'd realized it wasn't a normal job. The message read, "Pick up at 477 Industrial Boulevard, loading Dock 3. Deliver to 477 Industrial Boulevard, loading Dock 3. Time sensitive. Do not open trailer. Confirm receipt." Harold stared at his fleet messaging system, certain there was a mistake. Pick up and deliver to the same location. That made no sense. He typed back, "Confirm delivery address, shows same as pickup." The response came instantly. "Correct. Pickup and delivery are same location. You will understand during transit. Confirm receipt." Harold had driven for Westlake Freight for 9 years. He'd hauled everything from electronics to frozen food to auto parts. He'd never received a dispatch like this. But the job showed premium pay, triple rate, and Harold's daughter needed braces, his son needed college tuition, his wife needed a new car. He confirmed receipt. The pickup address was in an industrial area outside Omaha, Nebraska. Harold drove his empty trailer to the location, arrived at 4:47 a.m. The building at 477 Industrial Boulevard was old, brick, probably dating from the 1950s. Most of its windows were broken, and graffiti covered the loading dock doors. It looked abandoned. But loading Dock 3's door was open, fluorescent lights spilling out. Harold backed his trailer to the dock, set his brakes, and climbed down to check the load. A man stood at the dock, thin, middle-aged, wearing coveralls with no company logo. He held a clipboard. "Harold Chen." "That's me. What am I hauling?" "Can't tell you that. Orders. Just know it's going to the same place you picked it up. You'll drive for exactly 12 hours. Keep your speed at 62 miles per hour, no faster, no slower. Don't open the trailer. Don't stop except for fuel. At the 12-hour mark, you'll arrive back here and we'll unload. Simple job. You confirm." Harold hesitated. Everything about this felt wrong, but the pay was real. He'd confirmed it with dispatch before leaving. "I confirm. What route should I take?" "Any route, doesn't matter. Just drive for 12 hours at 62 miles per hour. The destination will find you." The man disappeared into the building before Harold could ask more questions. A minute later, Harold felt his trailer's suspension settle as weight was loaded. He couldn't see what was being loaded. The dock interior was too dark, and his mirrors didn't give him the right angle. But whatever it was heavy. His trailer sagged on its springs, and when Harold checked his kingpin connection, he felt the immense weight pulling at his fifth wheel. He got back in his cab, his fleet system updated. "Load confirmed. Begin transit." Harold pulled away from the dock at 5:12 a.m., heading east on I-80, maintaining exactly 62 miles per hour as instructed. His speedometer held steady, cruise control locked, and he settled in for what should have been a boring 12-hour circle. At 5:47 a.m., Harold noticed something wrong with his mirrors. The road behind him looked different than the road ahead. Behind was daylight, bright sun, clear sky. Ahead was pre-dawn darkness. Harold checked the time, 5:47 a.m. The sun shouldn't be up yet, but his mirrors showed full daylight. He adjusted the mirrors, thinking they'd been positioned wrong, but the image didn't change. Behind him, day. Ahead, night. By 6:15 a.m., the discrepancy had increased. His mirrors showed afternoon behind him, the sun high and bright. Through his windshield, it was still dark, not even dawn yet. Harold's brain couldn't reconcile the contradiction. He pulled over at a rest area, got out, and looked. Behind his truck, daylight, maybe 2 p.m. based on the sun position. In front, darkness, stars visible, maybe 4 a.m. The truck was parked at the boundary between two different times. Harold walked around his truck, trying to understand. At the trailer's rear, he was in full daylight, warm and bright. At the cab's front, he was in night, cold and dark. The transition point was somewhere around the center of his trailer, a line where time shifted from night to day. He walked forward from the rear, and at the trailer's midpoint, he felt the change, a coldness, a dimming, a sense of moving from afternoon backward into night. His phone showed 6:15 a.m., but the sun behind his truck said 2 p.m. Harold got back in his cab and sat there, trying to decide if he was hallucinating, if someone had drugged him, if he was having a stroke. The fleet system pinged. Continue transit. Do not stop. Time remaining 11 hours, 7 minutes. Harold continued driving. East on I-80, maintaining 62 miles per hour. His mirrors continued showing daylight behind him while darkness persisted ahead. By 7:30 a.m., his mirrors showed sunset, the sun low and orange behind his trailer. By 8:00 a.m., his mirrors showed night again. He'd driven through an entire day in the space behind his truck while only 2 hours had passed for him. At 9:12 a.m., Harold saw another truck ahead of him, same model as his, same company colors. As he got closer, he read the license plate, his truck number on the cab door, his number. Harold was looking at himself from behind, watching his own truck driving ahead of him exactly as he'd been driving. He was following himself. His CB radio crackled. "Harold Chen, this is Harold Chen. Don't try to pass me. Don't try to stop. Just maintain distance and keep driving. I'm you from 12 hours ahead. You'll understand when you become me." Harold grabbed his CB handset. "This isn't possible. I'm going crazy." "You're not crazy. The cargo you're hauling, it's time. Compressed time. 12 hours folded into a mobile container. You're driving a loop through your own timeline. Every 12 hours, you complete the circuit and arrive back at the loading dock at the exact moment you left. You deliver the cargo to yourself. I'm you completing the delivery, watching you behind me, knowing you'll become me in 12 hours when you complete your own circuit." "How do I stop this?" "You don't. I tried. I'm on my 19th loop. Or maybe it's my first loop repeated 19 times. I can't tell anymore. The cargo has to keep moving. If it stops, if the loop breaks, all 12 hours of compressed time expand simultaneously. Reality doesn't handle that well. Think of it as a 12-hour bomb that only stays stable while in motion. We're diffusing it by continuously driving it through its own timeline." The truck ahead, Harold's own truck, took an exit off I-80. Harold followed, maintaining distance. They drove through suburbs, through farmland, through towns Harold didn't recognize. Every place they passed, Harold's mirrors showed 12 hours ahead. Night when it was day ahead, day when it was night, the same road traversed at different times, his truck both ahead and behind, cause and effect tangled together. At 12:47 p.m., Harold's cab started to feel wrong. His seat was uncomfortable, but more than uncomfortable. It was familiar uncomfortable, as if he'd been sitting in it for days instead of hours. His hands were tired from gripping the wheel, but more than tired, exhausted, cramped, as if he'd been driving for weeks. His eyes burned with fatigue that didn't match the 7 hours he'd been awake. The fleet system pinged. Time remaining 4 hours, 25 minutes. Maintain speed. Harold looked in his mirrors. He could see multiple versions of his truck behind him now, a chain of identical vehicles all maintaining 62 miles per hour, all following the same route. He counted 7 before the distance made them too small to distinguish. 7 Harolds, all driving the same cargo, all trapped in the same loop, all existing simultaneously at different points in the 12-hour circuit. His CB radio came alive with multiple voices, all his own voice, all overlapping. Harold, this is Harold, you're approaching the midpoint, it gets worse from here. Harold, this is Harold, don't try to change routes, I tried, you just end up in the same place. Harold, this is Harold, I've been looping for 6 days. How long have you been looping? Harold, this is Harold, I can't remember what my daughter looks like anymore. The loop is erasing everything except the drive. Harold screamed into the radio, how do I stop this? Someone tell me how to stop. Silence, then one voice, older sounding, warn. Harold, this is Harold. I've been looping for 3 years, maybe. Time doesn't work right when you're living the same 12 hours forever. You can't stop it. The cargo has to keep moving, but I found something. At hour 11, at the 43-minute mark, there's a moment where the loop intersects itself. Past, present, and future all occupy the same space for about 4 seconds. If you do something different during those 4 seconds, something you didn't do in previous loops, you create a divergence, a split. Some versions of you continue the loop, but one version escapes. I think I haven't managed it yet, but I've seen trucks disappear during that moment, so someone's getting out. What do I do differently? Anything you haven't done before. I've tried screaming, tried crashing, tried opening the trailer. None of it worked because I'd thought of trying those things, so other versions of me had already tried them. UN. E'd to do something unthinkable, something you wouldn't ever do, something that violates your nature. That's the only way to create a true divergence. Harold drove, thinking, what wouldn't he do? What action was so contrary to his character that no version of him in any previous loop would have attempted it? He was a careful driver, methodical, risk-averse. He followed rules, maintained safety protocols, avoided confrontation. What was his opposite? At 11:43 p.m., the 43-minute mark of hour 11, Harold saw the intersection point. The road ahead shimmered multiple versions of the same highway occupying the same space, past and future, and present all visible simultaneously. He could see his truck driving toward him in the opposite lane, see himself in the driver's seat looking forward, see his trailer passing through his trailer like two ghosts overlapping. Harold made a decision. He grabbed his steering wheel and jerked it hard left, directly into the path of his oncoming self. The two trucks collided, or should have collided, but at the intersection point, physical laws were uncertain. The trucks passed through each other, metal and flesh and time mixing, and Harold felt himself fragmenting, splitting into multiple versions across multiple timelines. In one timeline, he crashed and died, and the loop continued with a dead driver. In another, he missed the collision and kept driving. In another, the cargo exploded and 12 hours of compressed time expanded, erasing a circular area 40 miles in diameter from reality. But in one timeline, one specific version, Harold's truck emerged from the intersection point on a different road, at a different time, no longer following the loop. Harold found himself on a rural highway he didn't recognize, daylight streaming through his windshield, his phone showing 2:17 p.m. on September 19, 2023. He'd been driving for 9 hours, but according to the date, no time had passed since he'd started. He pulled over, got out, checked his trailer. It was empty. The cargo was gone, unloaded or never loaded, and Harold couldn't remember if he'd actually hauled anything or if the entire loop had been some kind of temporal hallucination. His fleet system was blank. No messages, no jobs, no history. His phone had no missed calls, no texts. It was as if the past 9 hours or 12 hours or 3 years, depending on which version of himself he'd been, had never happened. Harold called his dispatcher. "Hey, it's Harold. What's my next pickup?" "Harold, you're not scheduled today. You're on home time. Did you forget?" Harold hung up, drove home to Omaha, saw his wife, his kids, his house. Everything was normal. But sometimes, late at night, Harold would wake up and feel the steering wheel in his hands, feel the vibration of his truck on the highway, and he'd look at his clock to make sure it wasn't 11:43. Because he could still hear the CB radio sometimes, voices that sounded like his own voice calling from somewhere in the loop. "Harold, this is Harold, still driving, still trapped. How did you get out? What did you do? Please tell me what you did. I've been here so long, please, Harold, please." And Harold would cover his ears and try to forget that somewhere in a tangled timeline, other versions of himself were still driving the loop, hauling compressed time through its own circuit, maintaining 62 miles per hour forever, delivering cargo to the same address they picked it up from, completing a journey that had no end because it had never really begun, just existed as a closed circuit of motion and time and consciousness trapped in 12 hours that repeated infinitely. On September 19th of the following year, Harold received a dispatch message at 3:33 a.m. Pick up at 477 Industrial Boulevard, loading Dock 3. Deliver to 477 Industrial Boulevard, loading Dock 3. Time sensitive. Do not open trailer. Confirm receipt. Harold deleted the message, quit his job the next day, but somewhere the loop continues. And somewhere a driver who looks like Harold Chen is maintaining 62 miles per hour, following himself through time, completing a delivery that never ends, while his voice calls out on Channel 19. This is Harold Chen at the 12-hour mark. Can anyone hear me? I've been driving the same route for longer than I can measure. Please, if anyone receives this, don't accept a job from 477 Industrial Boulevard. Don't haul time. Don't close the loop. Because once you're in it forever. All versions of you, all timelines, all possibilities, driving and driving and driving until you forget there was ever anything except the road. Story 10. The inspection bay that measures wrong. The DOT inspector at the Tehachapi inspection station measured Victor Reyes' truck on November 7, 2023, and told him his rig was 847 feet long. Victor looked at his truck, a standard Peterbilt 579 with a 53F. Oot trailer, and laughed. Your tape measure's broken, that's 65 feet tops. The inspector, a heavy woman named Rodriguez according to her name tag, didn't smile. Mr. Reyes, I'm measuring from your front bumper to your trailer's rear door. The tape reads 847 feet. I need you to exit your vehicle so we can conduct a full inspection. Victor climbed down, walked to the back of his trailer with Rodriguez, and watched her extend a measuring tape from his truck's front to its rear. The tape spooled out 10 feet, 20, 50, 100, and kept going far past where his trailer ended. Victor walked alongside the tape, following it, and after 65 feet, where his trailer actually ended, the tape continued extending through empty air, measuring distance that didn't exist. This is insane, Victor said. The tape's malfunctioning. My truck is 65 feet. I can see it's 65 feet. You can see it's 65 feet. Rodriguez wrote something on her clipboard. Sir, our equipment is calibrated weekly. The measurement is accurate. Your vehicle exceeds length regulations by 782 feet. I'm placing you out of service until the discrepancy is resolved. Victor stood in the inspection bay, looking at his perfectly normal truck, while Rodriguez treated him like he was hauling something the size of a city block. She measured again with a different tape. Same result, 847 feet. She used a laser measuring device. Same result. She measured his truck's shadow in the afternoon sun. The shadow extended 847 feet, stretching across the entire inspection station parking lot and into the highway beyond, even though Victor's actual truck was only 65 feet long. Look at this, Victor said, grabbing Rodriguez's shoulder and physically turning her to face his truck. Count the wheels, 6 on the tractor, 8 on the trailer, 14 total. That's standard. Does my truck look 847 feet long to you? Rodriguez looked, frowned. It looks normal to me, about 65 feet, but every measurement disagrees. This has happened twice before this month. Different drivers, different trucks. Always the same issue, vehicles that look normal but measure impossibly long. We're investigating whether it's a calibration problem with the station's equipment or something else. Something else, like what? Rodriguez hesitated. One theory is dimensional displacement. The trucks are extending into space that we can't see, but that still physically exists. Another theory is measurement breakdown. That distance itself is malfunctioning at specific locations, creating areas where the relationship between space and measurement breaks down. But those are fringe theories. Officially, we're calling it equipment malfunction. Victor called his dispatcher, explained the situation. Dispatch told him to wait for a supervisor, someone who could override the out-of-service order. Victor sat in the inspection bay for 3 hours while Rodriguez measured other trucks. All of them came back normal, 60 to 70 feet, exactly what they should be. Only Victor's truck measured 847 feet, despite looking identical to the others. The supervisor arrived at 6:47 p.m., a thin man named Hendricks with 30 years in the dot. He measured Victor's truck personally. The tape read 847 feet. "Mr. Reyes, I'm going to ask you to drive your truck slowly forward while I keep the tape measure at your front bumper. I want to see if the measurement changes as you move." Victor climbed into his cab, started the engine, and inched forward at 2 miles per hour. Hendricks held the measuring tape at Victor's front bumper, watching the readout. Victor drove forward 10 feet, 20, 30. He looked in his mirror and saw Hendricks standing where he'd started, holding the tape, but the distance between them wasn't growing. Victor had driven 30 feet forward, but Hendricks appeared to be only 5 feet behind him, as if the space between them was compressing as Victor drove. Hendricks yelled, "Stop!" Victor braked. Hendricks walked up to the cab, his face pale. "Mr. Reyes, according to the tape, you just drove 340 feet. I watched you drive maybe 30 feet. The space your truck occupies is wrong. It's not occupying normal space. It's occupying some kind of extended space that doesn't match visual perception." "What does that mean for me? Can I leave?" "I don't know. Let me make some calls." Hendricks spent an hour on his phone talking to people Victor couldn't hear. When he came back, he looked worried. "Mr. Reyes, you're being transferred to a federal facility for evaluation. This isn't a standard DOT issue anymore. Whatever's happening to your truck, it's beyond our scope." 2 men arrived at 9:23 p.m. wearing unmarked suits, driving a black SUV. They didn't introduce themselves or show credentials. They just told Victor to follow them, and when he asked where they were going, they said, "Somewhere that can measure you properly." Victor followed T. He SUV east on Highway 58, then north on smaller roads, into an area of desert he didn't recognize. They drove for 90 minutes before reaching a facility, a large warehouse surrounded by fencing, no signs, no markings. The SUV pulled up to a gate. The gate opened automatically, and they drove inside. The warehouse interior was enormous, maybe the size of an aircraft hangar, and it was full of vehicles. Trucks, cars, buses, even a few motorcycles, all parked in neat rows, all seemingly abandoned. Men and women in lab coats moved between the vehicles, measuring them with various instruments, taking notes. One of the suit-wearing men approached Victor. "Mr. Reyes, you're at a spatial anomaly research facility. We study vehicles that have been affected by dimensional displacement. Your truck is the 17th this month. We need to understand what's causing this before it spreads further." "Spreads like an infection?" "In a sense, the vehicles aren't changing, space around them is changing. Or rather, the vehicles are occupying more space than they visibly appear to occupy. We measure the displacement, track its progression, and try to determine the source." Victor was led to an examination area where his truck was measured by multiple devices simultaneously: lasers, radar, sonar, magnetic sensors. All of them agreed. His truck was 847 feet long, but visually it was 65 feet. A scientist explained, "Your truck is like an iceberg. Most of it exists in a dimension we can't see. What you see is just the tip. The other 782 feet are displaced into adjacent dimensional space." "Can you fix it?" "We don't know how. The displacement seems permanent. But the good news is, functionally, your truck operates normally. You can drive it, haul cargo, use it as you would any truck. The displacement doesn't affect performance, only measurement." "What's the bad news?" "The displacement is spreading. To you. We measured you when you arrived. You're 847 feet long, too. Most of you is displaced, existing in space we can't see. You look normal, but spatially you extend far beyond your visual boundaries." Victor looked at his hands. They looked normal. He touched his chest, felt solid, real. But according to the scientists, he was extending hundreds of feet into invisible dimensions, occupying space he couldn't perceive. "What happens to me?" "We don't know. You're the first driver whose displacement has matched their vehicles exactly. Usually there's a discrepancy. But you and your truck are synchronized, which suggests the displacement is linking you together. You might be merging with your vehicle on a spatial level." Over the following week, Victor was studied extensively. The scientists measured him daily. His displacement increased. 847 feet became 921 feet, then 1,043 feet, then 1,247 feet. He was expanding into invisible dimensions, and his truck was expanding with him. They were becoming one entity stretched across space that normal physics couldn't accommodate. Victor started to feel it. When he sat in his truck's driver's seat, he couldn't tell where he ended and the truck began. His hands felt like they were part of the steering wheel, his feet merged with the pedals, his spine connected to the seat's frame. He was the truck, and the truck was him, and both were extending into spaces that shouldn't exist. By day 14, Victor Reyes measured 3,429 feet long. His truck measured the same. When he drove, he could feel the road not just under his tires, but along the entire displaced length of his body truck hybrid. He felt pavement 3,000 feet ahead of his visible position, felt vehicles driving through his invisible displaced mass, felt his consciousness expanding to fill the enormous spatial volume he occupied. The scientists tried to stop the progression. They isolated Victor in a shielded chamber, exposed him to various fields and frequencies, attempted to compress his displaced mass back into normal space. Nothing worked. The displacement continued, accelerating. By day 30, Victor measured 17,844 feet, more than 3 miles. His truck measured the same. He'd become a being of vast spatial presence, occupying miles of invisible dimensional space, while his visible form remained human-sized. On day 42, Victor Reyes disappeared. Not physically. His body was still in the facility, still visible, still breathing. But his consciousness expanded beyond the scientist's ability to track. He displaced so far into adjacent dimensions that his awareness had followed, leaving his visible body as just an anchor point, a small representation of a consciousness that now extended across immeasurable distances. The scientists measured his final displacement, 847,329 feet, exactly 160.5 miles. His truck measured the same. And across that entire 160-mile length, Victor was aware. He could feel every inch of space he occupied, feel the curvature of the earth along his length, feel vehicles driving through his displaced mass, feel buildings and trees and mountains passing through him like ghosts. He was space itself now, a conscious volume stretched across California's desert, existing in dimensions humans couldn't perceive, but that were somehow more real than the 3 dimensions everyone else inhabited. The visible Victor, the human-sized anchor point, stood in the facility and spoke to the scientists in a voice that came from everywhere simultaneously. "I can feel others like me, drivers who have been displaced. We're all connected, all occupying the same adjacent spaces, all stretched across the country like a web of invisible consciousness. We're the road now. We're the space that vehicles travel through. And we're spreading, pulling more drivers into displacement, expanding the network until every truck, every driver, every inch of highway exists partially in this dimensional layer. You're traveling through us every time you drive. You just can't see us. But we're here. We're always here. Stretched across the miles, displaced into forever, occupying space that doesn't appear on any map. But that contains everyone who's ever driven too long, measured wrong, existed in 2 places at once without realizing it.